All right, welcome back to week 2 of the Double D Sports Show. Once again, I'm Eric DeCam here alongside Logan DeRungs. We're here on a blistery day in Madison, South Dakota. I believe it's about 20 degrees out. Pretty cold, so we're nice and warm inside here. We're going to talk some sports with you guys. And just want to wish a happy Veterans Day yesterday out to all the past, present, and future veterans out there. It wouldn't be possible for us to do what we do without your sacrifice and time and your family's sacrifice to allow you to do that stuff. So we want to especially say thank you to the veterans out there for the commitment you have made to the great nation of the United States. A lot of stuff to talk about this week. A lot of stuff in the NFL, some great games in the NFL. Big moves in the NBA. Lakers fire Mike Brown as coach. And a lot of speculation over the weekend who was going to come in. Phil Jackson, Mike D'Antoni, name Jerry Sloan was thrown around a little bit, so we'll get to that a little bit later in the game, or in the show. Talk about that. But let's start out with our week in the NFL. A lot of big games, a lot of big divisional games. Let's start there. What did you think about this week in the NFL?
Well, like you said, it was a good divisional week in the NFL. We saw a couple big division games. One of the most prominent, I felt like, was New Orleans and Atlanta. New Orleans got in there and picked up their 4th win, 3 in a row, and 4 of their last 5 as well. And Atlanta suffered their first defeat. That was the biggest one to me. Another big one was Minnesota and Detroit, and I think that's where we're going to start off talking about today. Thought the Vikings played really well. We saw Adrian Peterson have another great game, carrying the ball 27 times for 171 yards and 2 scores. Or sorry, just 1 touchdown. Ponder actually had 2 touchdowns. Threw 8 incomplete passes. He was 24 of 32 for 221 yards. Biggest thing with Christian Ponder in this game to me was no turnovers. You know, this guy's kind of been a Jekyll and Hyde for the Vikings his whole career, not just this season. When he doesn't turn the ball over, the Vikings usually turn out really well. And also playing in the Metrodome is a big thing for the Vikings. Being 5-1 at home as opposed to 1-3 on the road, you know, they are definitely a better team, not just in a dome, but in their dome. So I really like the Vikings when they moved to 6-4, just on the outside looking into the playoffs. The Lions, on the other hand, it's just not what we expected. I think for this year, we're looking at the Lions as probably being the last team in the NFC North, losing to the Vikings twice, losing to the Vikings pretty convincingly twice.
Yep.
I mean, yesterday afternoon, we saw Detroit make it a 10-point game at the end. I think there was just under 2 minutes left when Matthew Stafford hit Johnson for that touchdown.
Yep.
And I just think it's pointing out to a lot of Jim Schwartz. There's not enough control. There's not enough accountability with this Lions team. I think we need to go in a different direction just because these guys, they don't have the respect that he needs to demand. You know, we see Ndamukong Suh getting the personal foul penalties, and it isn't just Ndamukong Suh. But the reason I point him out is because when he was in college, he wasn't doing that. You know, when he was in college, he was a model citizen that donated a bunch of money to the Nebraska University just because that's the person he was. We know he's a good person, so obviously Jim Schwartz doesn't have the accountability with this guy, and that's kind of what I took out of that Minnesota-Detroit game. I think Minnesota this year has taken giant strides forward. That's definitely obvious. But I think even more than that, Detroit has taken huge steps backwards.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Detroit has been a huge disappointment for the Detroit fans out there, especially with the run they made last year, making the playoffs for the first time in quite a while.
Yep.
And the positive outlook on Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson and their defensive line, especially bringing in Nick Farley and Ndamukong Suh, Vanden Bosch on the end. You know, that's a pretty stout defensive line.
Averill.
Yeah, I mean, they got a good defensive line there, and you'd think they'd be able to do more. But, you know, I'm a Minnesota fan, and I'm more than happy to see them beat the Detroit Lions. Out of all the NFC North teams, that's probably my biggest team that I do not like the most. Love Calvin Johnson as a player. I wish he was playing somewhere else, but it was fun to watch the Minnesota Vikings actually play good football. And as you said, Ponder came out, and the whole team just got off to a hot start. Peterson was running the ball good. Like you said, Ponder not turning the ball over. First 4 games of the year, he had 0 interceptions. The last 3, he's had 8. So You can see right there, last 4 I think he's at 8. So you can see right there, they went 1-4 in their next 4 where they started off 4-0. So
it's a lot of, to me, is just having Adrian Peterson back.
well,
I think Christian Ponder could have been this player in his rookie season. I really do. I don't feel like he's improved that much. I just think having Adrian Peterson there to basically take some of the load. You know, the load is often put on the quarterback. Well, when you have a tailback like Adrian Peterson, you know, he is just that talented that not just what he does, just the fact that they demand the respect of the defense.
Right.
Teams have to come into that game. The Lions have to come into that game. Number one goal being stop Adrian Peterson. Their number one goal is not stop Christian Ponder. If their number one goal is stop Christian Ponder, then they are taking way too much of an overlooking at Adrian Peterson, and I think that's a lot of the reason why Ponder is able to do these plays. Not saying he's not a good quarterback,
right,
but saying that, in essence, the other team's keying on AP opens things up for him, which is why it's very important that he doesn't turn the ball over.
Right, and another thing going into that is last year Ponder came in as a rookie, no preseason, no training camp. He had that this year. It's a big difference when you're a young quarterback, and yeah, I agree 100%. When you have Adrian Peterson in the backfield, running the way he's running, leading rusher in the NFL, off of a terrible knee injury, no one would have thought he'd be back this soon. He ended up missing a total of a game and a half at the end of the season last year, and now he's back for a full season, rushing the way he's rushing. I mean, it's incredible.
He might be rushing a little better than he was before.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is just the fact that Adrian Peterson does get in his head, hey, you know, they never thought I could do this. They're counting me out. They're against me. I'm going to go out there and prove everyone wrong.
Yeah, and absolutely right. Peterson has always played better with a chip on his shoulder. You know, when he was drafted, it was, is he going to be the running back he can be, or is he injury prone? And he proved that he can be a great running back in the NFL.
Yep.
So let's move on to another shocker in the NFL. Cincinnati over the Giants in dominant fashion. You know, 31-13 victory at home over the Giants. Eli Manning struggled. A.J. Green had a big day. Andy Dalton, promising young quarterback, looked very good against this so-called tough New York Giants defense. It's amazing to me how 180 you can have a team in the New York Giants. They are the toughest team to figure out in the NFL, I think. You know, you never know what team is going to show up.
You really don't, but I'm not worried. I think this is typical New York Giant football. We've seen this all along with Tom Coughlin. We even saw glimpses of this when he was in Jacksonville. He's always had inconsistent teams, and I don't think it's because he's a bad coach. I think it's because they, quite frankly, game plan every week the same. They, quite frankly, practice every week the same. They go into the game with the same mentality. They just have an ability to turn it on when it really counts. Now, losing to Cincinnati, is that going to end their season? No. If they won this game, would it be better than losing it? Obviously, it's always better to win. But I just think that, you know, we don't see this so much with the Giants in the postseason. When they make the playoffs, they make runs. Eli will be clutch in the postseason, and the Giants will be clutch. Tom Coughlin will be clutch. Now, if they lose this way in the postseason to an inferior team, we'll have a different story, and we can discuss it then. But until then, I'm not worried. The Giants are still 6-4. They're still going to take that division. You look at Washington sitting at 3-6. The Eagles are now at 3-6. I believe Dallas won against the Eagles yesterday. Bumps them up to 4-5. 4-5. You're still 2.5 games ahead of the Cowboys are still 2.5 games behind the New York Giants. So I'm not worried from the Giants. Now Cincinnati, on the other hand, I'm just watching this game and thinking, finally we're seeing what we could see from Cincinnati. This is what we saw last year. It's a glimpse of a good young quarterback with good young receivers. They bring in Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. To me, they're expecting him to be a big help in the backfield. I don't know if we ever really saw that. Like I said before, you know, the Bengals are 26th in rushing in the NFL, getting just under 96 yards a game. To me, they have to get more than that because it takes pressure off Dalton, who is a good quarterback, but he's young. And that's what you do to take pressure off young quarterbacks. You just talked about it with Minnesota, with Adrian Peterson.
Yep.
It's no different in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, the Giants seem to be this way every November when they roll around. They play mediocre football. They get in cruise control, so to say. You know, they know that it's November. We got a long season. They got a good lead in the NFC East. You know, there's no one challenging for them. They're challenging them too hard for that #1 spot yet. And it seems like, you know, if the Cowboys would get on a roll and win some games, and they start challenging the Giants for that spot, then they're going to kick it up a notch. They know when it's time to play, and they know when it's time to kind of maybe take it easy. But I think, you know, they took it too easy, and they let the Cincinnati run all over them, and it puts doubts in some people's head. But not mine. Like you said, come December, end of December, January, they're going to be right where they need to be, and they're going to be in the playoff hunt and possibly a Super Bowl contender again.
I think it's more than about being about cruise control. There comes a time where, quite frankly, it is a good idea to somewhat take it easy, if you want to call it that. It's a long season. They're playing 16 games, 20 games to win a Super Bowl, or at least 19 if you have that first round bye. That makes it a long season, and it's hard on their bodies. So, I mean, for these guys to, really say that they're taking a week off, it's not really that. It's just that they are resting their bodies a little bit and maybe not going as hard as they should on some plays, which, like I said, if it's a different team that needs to make a push to make the playoffs, it's different. But when it's the Giants, and we know they do this every year, I'm not worried.
Right. I agree 100%. Let's move on to another divisional game. Let's go into the AFC division here, and let's talk a little bit about New England with a close win over Buffalo. New England, you look at it on paper, New England's a more dominant team, way better team than Buffalo is. But every year, since, the last couple of years anyway, Buffalo's always given New England trouble. They've beat them a couple times. They play them in a close game. Why is Buffalo able to do some of these things against a team like New England?
It's just a lot of the fact that these teams play each other twice a year for the last, 6, 8, 10 years since the divisions were realigned. And I believe Buffalo was even with New England in the original AFC East before all this. But that being said, it's typical of New England. They're the same way as the New York Giants. They win games close that they shouldn't. Sometimes they even lose to teams they shouldn't lose to.
Well, yeah, they lost to Seattle earlier.
New England lost to Seattle earlier. They lost to Arizona earlier. The Patriots are definitely not as dominant as they have been, but the league is a little more even. There's a little more parity. Buffalo, quite frankly, is not the Buffalo of years before. I mean, they have a 3-4 record. They're not 0-4, whatever, or 1 for whatever.
Right.
They actually have a respectable team for once, and moreover, the Patriots are going to win the East. They're going to make the playoffs, and they're going to be there in the end. And that's why a 37-31 close win against Buffalo doesn't worry me in the least.
No, I agree. I'm not too worried either. Like I said before, Buffalo always seems to play New England tough. No matter what the Buffalo record is or what New England's record is, Buffalo always plays New England close. They must have their number. Fitzpatrick throws for over 300 yards and 2 TDs. That's a good game for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Steve Johnson for Buffalo, 6 receptions, 86 yards. He's a promising young wide receiver that's got a good future ahead of him if he can keep his head on straight and not become the prima donna type wide receiver. But Buffalo's moving in the right direction. They've brought some guys in. Sean Marion at the linebacker position, Mario Williams at the defensive end position. They're moving in the right direction, but they still have a long way to go before they can contend for that NFC East. So, well, here's the biggest shocker of the weekend. Not really a shocker, I don't think, but biggest story by far is the Saints win over the Falcons. Saints are getting hot. I said last week before the Saints-Eagles games that, I picked the Eagles last week, and I was wrong. Should have known better. But the Saints are coming on strong. They got Joe Vitt back on the sideline. Big confidence booster for their defense. Vilma back on the field. There's just a swagger, but they got their swagger back. Drew Brees is playing better. They've won, like you said, they're 3 in a row, last 4 out of 5. Are they going to make a push for the playoffs? Is this enough to put them over the top and get them into the playoffs? And is this enough to convince Sean Payton on coming back and coaching next year?
We talked about this last week. I was wrong in the sense about New Orleans. I picked New Orleans to beat Philadelphia at home, and Philadelphia gave themselves every chance to win that game they could have asked for. 3 turnovers in the red zone. 2 turnovers in the red zone and 2 field goals out of 4 attempts. When you get in the red zone 4 times and put up 6 points on the board, you're not going to win games in most circumstances. Now Philadelphia is still at the end. Still there at the end. just wasn't enough. Talk about the Saints winning 3 in a row. This is how we expect the Saints. We're used to seeing the Saints rattle off 3, 4 game, 5 game win streaks here and there throughout the year. Seeing them with 13 and 3, 12 and 4, 11 and 5 records, even a 14 and 2 record the year, 13 and 3 the year they won the Super Bowl. I mean, getting Joe Vitt back on the sidelines is huge because he's the closest thing to Sean Payton they have other than Sean Payton. And that is because, you know, you got to realize what Joe Vitt's position was before this. He was an assistant head coach.
Right.
He was Sean Payton's vice president, if you will. You know, his right-hand man, his Robin to his Batman. That's the relationship those two had, and that's why it's huge to get him back on the sidelines coaching the Saints. Now you talk about, does this convince Sean Payton to stay around? You know, I want to touch on both of these. Firstly, Sean Payton will be back regardless of how they finish, or he will not, regardless of how they finish. If he's going to Dallas, if he's going to Philadelphia, if he's going somewhere else to coach, he's going somewhere else to coach. It's not as if it matters how they finish. Because he knows that, obviously, the reason, it's not Drew Brees out with a catastrophic injury for a whole year. It's not losing Jonathan Bellman to a suspension. He's back. Brees is back, playing good as ever.
Right.
2 straight games with a touchdown. With a touchdown pass. But the thing is, he knows his system works in New Orleans, and he knows that's what they're missing. So if he wants to come back to New Orleans, he's going to. Now, to touch on the playoff push for the Saints, I take back what I said. I don't think the Saints are done. I think they have a legitimate chance to make a postseason push right now. And I say this because they could go 6-1 or 5-2 very easily and finish with a 10-6, or heck, who knows? They might win out and finish with an 11-5 record.
Yeah.
You know, you don't know. 9-7 might even get them in. I feel like they can do that because I think they have games on the schedule that they can win. You know, if you look at their schedule, they got Oakland, the Niners, Atlanta, the Giants, Tampa Bay, Dallas, and Carolina. Now, that's a lot to take all at once just by saying that, but if you break it down a little bit closer, the first game that they play next week and the last game of the season, Oakland and Carolina, 2 very winnable games. There's 2 wins. San Francisco, Atlanta, Giants. Right in there, you got 3 games. If they can go 2-1 in those 3 very tough games, I think that gives them a chance. Because then they got Tampa Bay and Dallas, who are 2 more very winnable games. Tampa Bay is coming on strong, playing good football.
Yes, they are.
But they are definitely not still, to me, up to the Saints' caliber when New Orleans is playing well. So yes, I think they can make a playoff push. Will they? I'm not quite sure. You know, ask me in 3 weeks, and you're obviously going to know. But that's what it's going to take, because if New Orleans continues to play the way they have been playing, especially offensively, you better watch out.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I wrote off the New Orleans Saints way too early. And you can never do that with Drew Brees. If you write him off, he's just going to prove you wrong time after time after time. And I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on the Sean Payton thing. I think that team, after the rumors came out about Sean Payton not getting a deal with the Saints, maybe going somewhere else, being a free agent, so to say, in the coaching world, I think they're playing to prove, to come back, coach us. You come back to us, we're going to have a winning team. It's not greener the grass isn't greener on the other side. So I think they're playing a little bit harder for Sean Payton. But like, you know, again, touch on it again. You know, I'm not writing them off anymore. I think they're going to make a push. If they make, we'll see. This is a week-to-week league. They looked great against Atlanta. They're going to be coming off a high. You know, maybe their emotions come down a little bit, and they might not play as good next week. We'll have to wait and see. But another big thing in this game, and it's big around the NFL. You need one of these guys, or a guy like one of these 2 guys on your team. You talk about Gronk, or these 2 guys right here, Tony Gonzalez and Jimmy Graham. Key parts to both offenses. Jimmy Graham had 7 receptions for 146 yards, 2 TDs. Tony Gonzalez had 11 receptions for 122 yards, 2 TDs. Went over the 100 receiving touchdown mark for his career, which puts him 6th in all time, and the only tight end to ever go into double digits for touchdown receptions. I mean, this guy's by far a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you know, touch on that a little bit. You got to have 2, you know, a guy like Jimmy Graham and Tony Gonzalez in your offense to be successful.
You know, I don't know if you have to have that caliber of a guy to be successful. However, it makes it very easy. Very easy because, you know, we look at these guys, these are 2 of the best. I think you still have to put Tony Gonzalez in the top 5 in the league in tight ends. I think Antonio Gates is still in that top 5. I think Rob Gronkowski is definitely number 1. Jimmy Graham's right behind him. But after that, you make a case like Gonzalez Gates. Even though they're older, they still are getting the job done.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, you look at 11 receptions and 102 yards. I believe is what he had, 102.
122.
122. That's even more.
Yeah.
You know, 20 yards more than I thought. I know Graham had 7 catches. 2 of his 7 catches are touchdowns. What does that tell you? It tells you when Drew Brees needs to make a play, he's looking for Jimmy Graham. When Matt Ryan needs a play, he's looking for Tony Gonzalez. You know Brady's always looking for Gronk.
Yep.
And that's something that's really, really a good thing for these players. Because tight ends, for those of you that may not know that much about football, about position-wise, just know when teams score a touchdown and kick a field goal, you have to understand a tight end, number 1 purpose is not to receive the football.
Right.
The tight end's number 1 purpose is to see the edge and block. They put tight ends on the field because they are guys that can go on the end of the line and block, but also have the ability to catch a ball. There's a lot of tight ends in the league that are basically, you could make fists and tape around them because all they do is block. They never get the ball thrown to them because they can't catch. So these guys having hands, having the ability to run after the catch, it just makes them even more special to an offense. We see teams that utilize the tight ends. You know what? I'm not sure that Drew Brees, Matt Ryan need these tight ends. I think we know this with Tony Gonzalez, but I think it's the same with Jimmy Graham. They're such special athletes. They're going to have success no matter where they're at.
Yep, I agree 100%.
One more thing to touch on quick on the Saints-Falcons game. One big key stat here. I don't know if you saw this or not, but Michael Turner, okay? 13 carries, 15 yards.
Yeah.
Not 50 yards, okay? Not 1,500 yards. 15 yards. What's up with that? Barely over a yard a carry.
Yeah.
I mean, you say, well, we want Michael Turner carrying the ball 20, 25 times. Not when you're only getting a yard a carry, you don't.
Right.
It just wasn't working. They never did it. Atlanta, 46 yards total. I think Matt Ryan's sacks, he might have been sacked a couple times or something, might have drugged that. I don't know if you know Matt Ryan's stats or not for rushing.
Matt Ryan had 2 carries for 2 yards, and he was sacked 3 times, I believe. He was sacked 3
So
times.
see there, the sacks will take away from that. But New Orleans, nonetheless, 46 yards rushing as a team. I mean, this is a team that has to carry the ball. You run the ball to control the clock, period.
Right.
That's why you run the
Right.
football in the league. And you know what? You can say Matt Ryan, 411 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a great game. Yeah, but guess what? Drew Brees is on the other sidelines. You want to keep him on that sidelines. You want to run that clock.
Yep.
When you beat the New Orleans Saints, you're not going to beat the New Orleans Saints 41-38.
No.
You're going to beat the New Orleans Saints 24-17,
Yep.
17-10. That's how you beat the Saints, by keeping Brees on the sidelines. You have to dominate time of possession. I'd be really curious. I hope somebody go out, look at your internet, go whatever site you got to go to, find the stat and post it to us on our Twitter page at DBLD Sports Show. Okay, that's at DBLD Sports Show, or comment on our YouTube link, whatever it takes. But give me a stat of Drew Brees when his team wins the time of possession and loses the time of possession. I think this guy, when teams control the clock, will have a lower win percentage than when his team controls the clock. And I think that's a pretty easy assumption to make just because we know what Drew Brees does with the ball when
Right.
he gets it.
Right.
But, and also, here's another thing to look up. See, when the Saints score over 30, how many times they win in under 30. I bet you they win a lot less games when they score under 30.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that one. You've got to control the clock when you're playing the New Orleans Saints. You got to keep Drew Brees on that sideline. But one thing that's really impressed me as of late is the New Orleans Saints rushing game. If they can get a dominant rushing game, they had 148 yards rushing. Chris Ivory had 72, Mark Ingram had 67, and Pierre Thomas had 10. Those are 3 great running backs. You get those guys mixed into your offense, and they start running the ball good, that's going to take a lot of pressure off of Drew Brees, and it's going to be a hallelujah for Drew Brees, so to say, because he can do the play action. He's going to feel like Peyton Manning out there. He's going to know exactly what the defense is doing, and he's just going to be able to pick apart the defense if these guys can continue to rush the ball. They are. Chris Ivory, great running back. I love this guy. I don't know if you saw it yesterday. I don't know if you watched the game. He had a great run. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often for the New Orleans Saints where they break a big 60-plus, 40-plus yard rush. But Chris Ivory took one for 60-some yards, and that stiff arm he gave, holy buckets, he just about knocked that guy out with that stiff arm he gave. This kid is a a vicious runner, an Adrian Peterson type runner where he's just running angry, looking to run people over. He's not going to bounce out of bounds. He's going to cut it back inside and run you over and make you tackle him before he goes out of bounds. So something very exciting for the New Orleans Saints fans to look at is if you could get your rushing game going, that's definitely going to help your team out.
Yeah, and they had Darren Sproles is obviously out with an injury. There's
Yeah,
another
that's
guy.
another
Throw
guy.
that guy in there. You know, he can still carry the ball and run between tackles. No matter what anyone says, this guy's still a running back, not a wide receiver. And yeah, like you said, you touched on, Chris Ivory, Mark Ingram. You didn't even mention him, but that's just because he quietly has 67,
Yeah.
57, somewhere on there yards rushing. This guy is just a good overall tandem that they have.
Yep.
And, I think they complement each other. I heard someone talking the other day, why doesn't New Orleans make a trade? Why don't they make a deal and send one of these guys somewhere and get some help defensively, get some help on the offensive line, whatever they need? Well, the reason is these guys complement each other. Mark Ingram, Chris Ivory, like you said. Well, Ivory obviously is that powerful running back. Mark Ingram kind of a tweener with that. And then you got Pierre Thomas. He's pretty much a bruiser as well. Darren Sproles is the speedster. These guys complement each other. They never know what they're going to do because the Saints do such a good job disguising the sets and disguising the calls. And Drew Brees, once again, obviously the running game is set up by the passing game because they have to respect Drew Brees.
Yep,
at all
absolutely.
times.
That's something exciting to look forward to as we move on in the NFL season. So as we did last week, we're going to touch on our top 5 NFL teams, our top 5 power rankings. My top 3 kind of stayed the same, maybe moved around a little bit, but I got 2 new ones in the top 5. I'm gonna put Denver at number 5, basically just because they have Peyton Manning and they're playing good football right now. I think they're coming together as a team. They're getting into that Peyton Manning system. They're learning his ways. They're learning how he plays, how he prepares. And one thing I didn't touch on last week that I wanted to, when Peyton Manning's on the sidelines, like you said, whether it was a touchdown scoring drive or they had to punt the ball
Or he threw an interception.
the first thing he does is he's with that offensive unit. He's with his offensive line, telling them what they can do to get better, telling them how, if you move here and then you pick up this guy, that gives me another second to look for my passers. It's exciting to see Denver Bronco football playing this well with Peyton Manning on their side. So I got Denver at number 5. Who do you got?
I put New England Patriots at number 5. I just think their offense is just enough to just keep them in games no matter what. And it's a lot of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Whenever they have these guys together, you can't count them out. They're 6-3. They're in great position to win another division title. 4th in rushing, 5th in passing, 8th in rush defense. That's 3 pretty good stats right there.
Yeah.
Then you look at their pass defense and they're 22nd, and that kind of takes away from that. But if they fix this, they're going to be hard to beat. They acquired Aqib Talib, kind of a mouthful there. They acquired Aqib Talib at the trade deadline last year. This is a guy that came out of Kansas University, back when Kansas was good with Roy Mangino. Back a few years ago, they went to the Orange Bowl. So, this is a good player out of college. He played in Tampa Bay, was a good player there. A lot of off-the-field issues. A lot of off-the-field issues, getting in trouble. New England usually does a pretty good job controlling these guys. We saw him work things out with Randy Moss, as I mentioned last week. We know that New England can, and Coach Belichick can make this work. And I'm excited to see him do it because I think Aqib Talib can turn that 22nd pass D not into a number 1 pass D, but definitely up in the teens as opposed to in the 20s. And that makes New England even tougher. But who do you got at 4?
And, I kept New England at number 4 this week, just for all the same reasons you said. You touched on everything there. It's New England, it's Tom Brady, it's Bill Belichick. They're going to be there at the end. One new one I have in there at number 3 is the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're coming on strong. The showing they put up against Oakland, granted it's Oakland, but teams don't usually score 55 points in an NFL game, no matter who you're playing. So that just shows the dominance they have. Joe Flacco's playing good football. Their defense is playing good football, even without Ray Lewis. They're just a good team. John Harbaugh, he's got them right where he wants them. Ray Rice, good running back. So I got the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're going to be there at the end. I think they're going to be a contender in the AFC, but I don't know if Joe Flacco and that team has enough to push them over the top to make a push for the playoffs.
Well, that's a push for the Super Bowl. Obviously.
Or a push for the Super Bowl.
They're going to be in the playoffs. They're sitting at 7-2. I actually don't have Baltimore in my top 5. Reason being, I'm just not quite sold on Joe Flacco, and that's bottom line how it's going to be. Also, the defense without Ray Lewis. You know what? Ray Lewis, similar, kind of like to a Brian Urlacher. You know, Brian Urlacher this year for Chicago, who is my number 4 team, is not. Brian Urlacher is not the same Brian Urlacher where he's going to be a defensive MVP candidate. But Brian Urlacher is a figurehead, just as Ray Lewis is. And I'm not confident that the Ravens can win a Super Bowl without Ray Lewis there. Now, if he comes back, energizes that defense, possibly. But I also don't think Joe Flacco's a Super Bowl quarterback. Now, there's guys all over that win Super Bowls. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we see guys like that all the time win Super Bowls.
Brad Johnson
in Tampa
Yeah.
over when they played Oakland that year. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see this all the time. You know, Jake Delhomme took the Panthers to the Super Bowl. But when push comes to shove, I just feel like there is not the quarterbacks that there are now. You know, we got quarterbacks in the league now that are going to be a lot more suited than Joe Flacco, and I just don't have the trust in them yet. Now, they can prove me wrong. They might win a title one of these years and prove me wrong. Until they do, not going to be sold on them. Like I said, I got Chicago at number 4. I just feel like they're the same old Bears. They had a huge chance last night to win a game, a big-time game, NBC, prime time, Sunday Night Football. The whole country's watching, and they just couldn't get it done. Now, Jay Cutler went out with a concussion, brought in Jason Campbell. You know what? They still have Matt Forte. They still have Brandon Marshall. They still have these weapons that Cutler desperately needed. He's got his offensive line put back together a little bit better now. That's what Cutler needed. It just seems like they never have enough. Cutler always needs more. Why can't we get Cutler more? What more can we get for Cutler to make him win us a Super Bowl?
Right.
I don't know if he's ever going to. Record isn't very good, sitting at 7-2, but I'm just not sold on him. Even though sloppy conditions, no Cutler, still not impressed. Defense is solid. That's why I got him at number 4.
Yeah, and I kept Chicago out of my top 5 this week just for the fact that, you know, we don't know the situation with Cutler. He's dealt with concussions before, if he's going to be able to come back from this or not. But I wasn't really impressed with the showing they had against the Houston Texans and Cummings. And I mean, the Houston Texans, Arian Foster ran all over that defense.
Right.
I mean, so their defense is good, but is their defense enough to win them a game if Cutler gets hurt? Obviously not. You can't bring Jason Campbell in and expect the same results you have with Cutler. Cutler and Marshall, they have that chemistry from Vanderbilt, from Denver, and now in Chicago. That's just a team that, you know, those two guys have that pairing that they can do special things. And Forte, he's a good running back, but I don't think he's as good as everybody says. I don't know if he was worth the money that Chicago gave him. You know, he needs a lot to get going some nights. So I left Chicago out of my top 5. As I stated earlier, I had Baltimore at number 3. So who'd you have at number 3?
Well, I got Atlanta back at number 3. I think that I see them drop from 1 to 3 this week in my rankings, like we talk about all the time. It's a week-to-week league.
Yeah.
But I feel like the Monkeys kind of off their back now. You know, they lose in a great performance by Drew Brees, but they lose the game. Now they just concentrate on improving and making that playoff push. You know, they concentrate on getting better. They're 25th in the NFL, giving up 127 yards rushing. They got to improve on that. They can't let teams come in there and control the clock. Okay? Now, we saw a few years ago when they lost in the playoffs, they lost to Arizona, then they lost to Green Bay. Those are both teams, Arizona and Green Bay, came in there and threw the ball around and outscored them. Well, they're going to, you know, if they get outscored by teams, and then they allow teams to run the ball and control the clock, how are they ever going to win? They're not going to. That's why I feel like they just have to get better on the rush defense. But they have 7 weeks to do that before the postseason starts. So, Atlanta, don't panic. You're going to be fine. But they drop at number 3 to me.
Okay, yep. And then I got Atlanta at number 2. I had them at number 1 last week, so they dropped a spot for me too. And just it's not because they're lost to the Saints, but you know, they're vulnerable to a high-powered offense. Their defense definitely needs to step it up. You know, their passing yards, they're 4th in the league. Total yards, they're 6th in the league. Scoring, they're 7th in the league. You know, I think they're gonna get a motivational push next week after this loss to the Saints. They know they should have beat them. They're gonna see them again in 3 weeks in the Georgia Dome, and it's gonna be a totally different game, I think. So I got Atlanta at number 2. They're still one of the best teams in the league. I still think they're gonna make a push in that NFC. Love to see them in the Super Bowl just for the fact of Tony Gonzalez and Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's an outstanding human being. I mean, I like the way he handles himself. I like the way he leads that team. It's been a long time since Atlanta's had a quarterback like that in their franchise. So I had them at number 2, and I bumped Houston up to number 1 just because of what they did. They came into Soldier Field in terrible weather, rainy, sloppy mess in Chicago. You think it's going to favor Chicago the whole way. Chicago's going to win, but they held their own. They dominated that game, and they came out with a 13-3 win. And it's Houston. They're playing good football right now, and I think they're the number 1 team in the league.
I have Houston on my board too. I just want to touch on that 13-6 win.
13-6.
But the thing is, and Chicago missed a pretty simple. Robbie Gould missed a field goal that he doesn't usually miss. I just don't feel like Houston. Let me get to it. I do have Houston number 1, but first I got number 2. I got 2 words, Peyton Manning. Okay. Now I understand they're 6-3. I understand that I got an 8-1 team behind them, a 7-2 team behind them. Baltimore 7-2, not even in my rankings. And New England 6-3 after beating Denver. Okay, in Denver. Doesn't matter to me. Excuse me, I believe that was in New England. But it doesn't matter to me because Peyton Manning and the Broncos are better now. Okay, they play Houston. I bet on the Broncos. I really do, because they've made so many steps in the positive direction in the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. They've just gotten better every single way along the way. Right. And Denver, if you look at their schedule, they are absolutely now in perfect position to make a run. I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos go 13-3. I really wouldn't. If you look, they're at home against San Diego. As poor as San Diego's playing, I can't see Denver slipping there. Then you got 2 games against Kansas City. Now, granted, it's a division game, and they're always tough. Well, Kansas City hasn't been this bad. Kansas City is usually not the 1-8 team, 1-7 team, whatever it may be.
Right.
Okay? You got another game at Oakland. Granted, Oakland on the road, division game. Oakland is not very good.
Right.
Kansas City and Oakland and San Diego are not very good. They're in a really weak division. I think there's 4 wins for them. Then we got at home against Tampa Bay. Okay, Tampa Bay's a good team, but it's at home. At home against Cleveland. Okay? Now they do have to go to Baltimore. You know what? It's going to be a tough game in Baltimore, but I picked Denver. I would not be surprised if Denver wins out and goes 13-3, and then you're going to be looking at these power rankings and saying, holy cow, Denver's 13-3. They might be number 1 movie.
Right.
And that's really the thing with Peyton Manning, spreading the ball, a bunch of different receivers, 2 very good young receivers. I don't know if you've seen them play yet, but Eric Decker and Demaryius Thomas, 2 very young, very talented young men, and they're really getting it done. Von Miller continuing to make plays. Got 3 young, upcoming, going to be superstar defensive players in my mind in the defensive backfield. Tony Carter had his 2nd pick 6 of the year yesterday. Raheem Moore plays strong safety for him, and Chris Harris, who is actually the starting quarterback, actually had a fumble return for touchdown against San Diego in that Monday Night Football game. But he's actually the starter alongside Champ Bailey, helping him out. And then Tony Carter comes in to give Champ Bailey a little spell. It's going to prolong Champ Bailey's career.
Yep.
Because he's going to be able to get breaks, and it's going to make Denver's defense better because they have more talent on the field. Then we wanted to go to my number 1 team. I got Houston there. I'm just going to touch on it briefly because I think Denver's on the rise. I personally feel that Denver and New England are going to end up slugging it out. I don't know where I'm getting that. I just feel like New England and Denver are slowly improving. They're very quietly 6-3, both teams. Yeah. Both teams have documented their struggles. Well, guess what? They've had some good things to both parts of their seasons. And I'm confident in the way the Broncos are playing. But we talked about why I have Houston number 1. They're 8-1. They won the game last night for the best record tied the best record in the NFL with Atlanta. They beat Denver. They beat Chicago. Both have good records. They beat Baltimore as well. They're 2nd overall in rush defense and 4th in pass defense. That's pretty good defense there for Houston. Yeah. If injuries don't happen, they'll win the division and they'll get a bye in the playoffs. And they're gonna definitely have the ability to make a run in the playoffs. But once again, I think the AFC is a lot more even than people are giving credit.
Right, and I'm going to agree with you on the Denver moving up the chart. You know, they're in my top 5. I want to see how they do these next couple weeks against some of these teams that they should dominate. If they continue to dominate against the Kansas Cities, the San Diegos, the Oakland within their division, you know, then I can put them up there a little bit higher. But the big games, like you said, coming down the schedule are going to be Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a great football team, and Baltimore. Baltimore is a great football team. So I think they have a chance to win out and go 13-3. And Houston, like I said, I had them at number 1 along with you. You know, they got Jacksonville next week. They got Detroit the week after that. Tennessee, New England, Indy. They play Minnesota, and then they finish up at Indy. You know, they don't have an easy road to last. Indy's going to be a tough team.
Absolutely
Indy's a good team.
I expect Indianapolis to knock them off one of the
At least
times.
one of the times. If Minnesota could continue to play good football, who knows? Minnesota could knock them off. New England, that's not going to be an easy game. So that could be a potential 3 losses there. Detroit, that could be another loss. So Houston's got a hard road ahead of them, I think. You know, and if like you said, if Denver can win out, go 13-3, maybe they get that number 1 seed and they get the bye that first week, and that would definitely help them out with Peyton Manning and his group. You know, we've seen in the past that if you get that first round bye and come on, Green Bay last year, they had a great season, got the first round bye, and then New York Giants came into Lambeau Field and took them for a ride and knocked them out of the playoffs. So.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a benefit to get that first round bye, but I think for Denver it would be. If Houston, on the other hand, if they got the first round bye, I don't think it would be a benefit to them. If Houston got the first round bye in the playoffs and Denver comes into their house, I think Denver's going to win that game. But, you know, there's a long season left to go.
Right.
And
a lot of it changes. You know, it's really.
We'll have a totally different outlook next week when we talk to them.
Our top 5 next week will probably be completely different.
It probably will.
There probably will be no team that is sitting at the same spot. I think if Houston wins, they can keep their spot at number 1. But after that, Denver loses, they slide. You know, if Baltimore wins again, I might have a little more confidence in them, depending on how they win. Pittsburgh is another team that's got to be on the rise. They're probably going to get a W tonight.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. If they don't get a W, there's something wrong there. They're playing Kansas City.
We normally like to break down Monday Night Football games. We sort of skipped that for this week on the schedule, just because we feel like Pittsburgh, even going on the road to Kansas City, should not have much of a trouble. No Troy Polamalu. Should be no problem. They should actually probably.
Well, they're favored by 12.5 points, and I want to pick them to win by 14. So
yeah, I mean, I'd take that Kansas City maybe has a chance to cover that spread, but you know it's going to take a good effort by them. But one last game we want to touch on. We saw Dallas knock out Philadelphia.
Ooh.
Now, this is a big win for Dallas, but I want to ask you, just kind of off the cuff, is it a bigger win for Dallas or a bigger loss for the Eagles?
I think it's a bigger loss for the Eagles. I really do. You look at what's going on in Philly right now. Michael Vick went down with a concussion. The week before that, he was sacked 7 times against the New Orleans Saints. You know, he was thrown around again this last week against the Cowboys. They were getting good pressure on Michael Vick, and I just think there's going to be a change in Philly. There's no doubt about that. But you know, I agree. It's a bigger loss for the Eagles. I mean, Andy Reid's got to know he's going to be done at the end of the year. They got the respect for Andy Reid. They're going to let him finish out his year, but he's going to be gone. I think Michael Vick's going to be gone, and you know, Foles, he came in, and I thought he looked pretty good that first couple series he came out. He was confident. He was poised. He sat in the pocket. He made some good throws, but in the end, it was the punt return, you know, that put him up by 7, and then the pick 6 that put him up by 14. That was the difference in the game. But it was a bigger loss for Philly.
You know what? I'm going to take the other side of the argument and say it's a bigger win for Dallas, and I'll tell you why. I feel like Dallas, there is no holes on their team. I think they're a good football team. I think they're a team that could make the playoffs. I really do. And you know what? Can Philadelphia? I don't think so. You know what? We talked about, is it Andy Reid's fault? Ultimately, I say yes. Because the defense hasn't been the same since he lost Jim Johnson as his defensive coordinator. He made changes in the coaching staff. He brought in players. You know, management brought him in players, but Andy Reid, whose job is it to find a system to get these guys to work in? It's a job of the head coach.
Right.
Okay, Namdi Asamoah, arguably the best cornerback in the league. Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie, they traded their protege, Kevin Cobb, turned out to be a pretty good trade for them, for Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie. That never worked out. Okay, brought in one of the leading pass rushers in the league, and Jason Babbitt. That never worked out for them. And collectively, they got the defensive stats individually, but collectively they're not getting the job done. So, bottom line, yeah, I think Andy Reid is at fault. I think it's right for Philadelphia to go in a different direction.
Right, I agree.
Now, Andy Reid will find another job soon.
Yeah, he'll be
Probably
unemployed for
even-
about 5 minutes.
Probably even for the next season. Maybe a thing like happens where the coach takes a year off as well. I don't know. But in my mind, he will find a job. But I think he'll be out of Philly unless they somehow win out and make the playoffs. I just don't see that happen.
No.
It would take a miracle.
Yeah.
Nick Foles looked good when he came in. Looked okay to me. Okay, he scored a touchdown on a broken play. He threw the bomb down the field to, I believe it was Macklin caught it. Macklin and Jackson were in the end zone. Macklin ended up making the catch. All right, it was a broken play. He scrambled. He made something out of nothing, which is good. But we don't see him hitting Deshaun Jackson on a crossing route in between two defenders and putting the ball in there perfectly. Okay, we're seeing an okay quarterback. Well, that's what we have with Michael Vick. Now, say if he doesn't turn the ball over, yeah. Well, he did throw a pick six. Granted, pick six on a tough break. Ball got batted around, tipped around.
Right.
Tip ball is not always the quarterback's fault. And this end of the line, though, is he turned the ball over. Dallas scored. Where are these turnovers going to come to an end for Philadelphia? Now, you can say Nick Foles caught a tough break. I don't know. But the point I want to make about the Cowboys is I think that the Cowboys, Dallas has something about them that just catches the eyes of Americans all the time. No matter what Dallas does, you're thinking, holy cow, the Cowboys. They're relevant. They're in the news. Whether they're winning, whether they're losing. So, that being said, it doesn't really matter if they have a good team, but I feel like they do. I think Dallas has a chance to get in there and make a good run. Now, we look at their schedule. Okay, Cleveland, Washington, Philadelphia, Cincinnati.
Yep.
4 very winnable games. Actually, I have Washington twice.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, they got Pittsburgh and New Orleans, so I think it might be their 2 toughest games left in their schedule. But there's no reason they can't win all but 1 or 2 games to close out the year if they just go and do it. Now, will they? In the end, I don't think so. I don't think they will. I think they'll miss the playoffs again.
Well, yeah,
but the
even if
point
they-
is that they can do that. And we'll just have to wait and see if that's something that happens.
Yeah, even if they do win, like you said, they win the 4 in a row against Cleveland, Washington, Philly, and Cincy, and then they win their last one again against Washington. It's very tough. Like we've said many a times, it's very tough to beat the same team twice in a season. But even if they do that and lose to Pittsburgh and New Orleans, which I think they would, that gives them 5 wins. That puts them 9 and 7 on the season. That's not enough to make the playoffs. So they're going to have to they're going to have to get a win against Pittsburgh. They're going to have to get a win against New Orleans. They're going to have to win at least 6 out of their next 7 if they do that. So.
Absolutely.
So-
We talked about a lot of news about Jerry Jones in the last few days. What do you think? Too much control with the Cowboys?
Absolutely. I think Jerry Jones has way too much control. You look at the New England Patriots and their owner. He doesn't have anything to do with the player personnel and who they draft. And you look at the same with Pittsburgh and the same with San Francisco, Baltimore. And these teams are winning games. They're getting into Super Bowls. They're making the playoffs consistently. I just think Jerry Jones is too proud of what he's got in Dallas, and he needs to just back off a little bit, count his money instead of worrying about who's on the team. He's too involved, I think.
I think there's just a difference. Does he have too much control? Yes. I'm going to start off by saying that. I really think he has too much control. But it's not that he can't be the general manager. Now, do I think he does a good job as general manager? I think they have good players. I think Dallas has good players on their team. Like their offensive playmakers. I mean, look at them.
Well, yeah.
They speak for themselves. Des Bryant's a good player. Miles Austin's a good player. Jason Witten. These are terrific players.
Yeah.
Talk about the offensive line. Now, that was their weakness. Every team has a weakness. Dallas tried improving the offensive line. They're slowly getting better.
Yep.
Okay, they got DeMarco Murray. When he's healthy, he's a good running back. Don't even want to talk Tony Romo because that's just a whole another
Yeah.
kettle of fish. But defensively, DeMarcus Ware, they draft Morris Claiborne, they bring in Brandon Carr, who got a pick 6 yesterday. They got a good team. Do they have good coaches? Is Jason Garrett a good coach? I don't know, but here's what I want to say and point out. I think Jason Garrett is a good coach.
Yeah, I think so too.
Here's what I want to point out. Jerry's a good GM. All right, he gets good players. He gets good coaches. He's got the money to spend. Makes a big difference. Here's my point. This guy puts too much pressure on these players. Too much pressure on these coaches. All right, when he's coming down on the field for the end of the game, when he's over there chirping in the air, Jason Garrett, when it's 4th down, and Jason Garrett wants to know, he's trying to figure out what play he should call, if he's going for it or not, or if he's going to punt, or what he's going to do. He's going to use a timeout. Then he's got to look and hear back 20 feet behind him, hear Jerry Jones chirping about what he should be doing.
Yeah.
Well, guess what, Jerry? If you want to coach, coach.
Yeah.
But otherwise, stay up in the booth, okay? Stay up till we got all the free food, all the free beer, whatever you want. It's your, what do they call it? Jerry Jones Palace.
Yeah.
How they refer to it as.
Yeah.
Okay. Stay up there. Stay out of the way. When they go to Philly, maybe buy the NFL Sunday ticket and watch the game from home. I don't know, but
Yeah.
he's got to alleviate the pressure. Don't go out to ESPN and do the interviews and go on the radio and go to the newspaper and talk about how you're protecting Jason Garrett, you're protecting Tony Romo. When in reality, your tone of voice and the actions you're making on TV, these cameras are looking at you, Jerry. All right? You got to control yourself a little bit, and that's what he's doing wrong. Great general manager, great owner, so passionate about the Cowboys.
Right.
But I feel like his actions put too much pressure on them, and that's why the Cowboys can't compete and perform.
Well, I agree totally. I mean, you don't see ESPN reporters going up to Robert Kraft after a New England win.
No.
You don't see them going up to Ziggy Wilf after a Minnesota win. They're flocking to Jerry Jones because after a Cowboys loss or even a win because they want to hear what he has to say, and that's, like you said, that's got to come to an end.
Yep.
Well, that wraps it up this week for the NFL. We're going to take a little break here. We're going to come back with some MLB talk, free agency. Jason Hamilton, Zach Greinke, B.J. Upton, some big names in the MLB free agency pool. Where are they going to end up? I've made a chance and gone through some of the free agency list and picked out some guys that I think are pretty interesting. So we'll touch on that when we come back.
Double D Sports Show.
All right, we're back here, Madison, South Dakota, Double D Sports Show. We're going to talk a little baseball here. First of all, I want to apologize if my voice sounds a little scratchy. I'm battling a little bit of a sore throat, but just for you guys, I'm going to suck it up and fight through and give you guys a good show. So let's start into it. MLB free agency. We touched on it just a little bit before we left. Josh Hamilton, Zach Greinke, B.J. Upton, 3 big names in the MLB. Where are they gonna end up? You know, what do you think? Is he gonna? We'll start with Josh Hamilton. Think he's gonna stay with Texas? Or rumor is, Yankees might be offering him some money to come there. What do you think? Where's he gonna go?
It's not necessarily where I think Josh Hamilton will go. It's where I think would be the best fit for him. You say this both ways. With Josh Hamilton, looking at what I think the best fit for him and what team I think needs him the most. Okay, and I guess the main thing I like to point out with Josh Hamilton, he's been a steady, reliable offensive threat for the past 3 seasons. There's no doubt about that. Okay. In 2010, 11, and 12, respectively, Josh Hamilton hit 32, 25, and 43 home runs. Now in 2011 he had some injuries. Okay, he only played 121 games out of a 162 game season. Last year 148 games. That's why he was a possible MVP candidate. Alright? So the RBIs, once again 2010, 11, and 12 respectively, 100, 94, 128. Alright? He's a solid offensive threat. He really is. You look at the teams in the playoffs, you look at the teams all over the league, what are the teams that need him the most? I think Baltimore. I think Baltimore is the best fit for Josh Hamilton. They could use a big name guy, not just to sell tickets, to sell merchandise, to do all the sales, not just the sales aspect of having Josh Hamilton, but they got a manager, Buck Showalter, who knows how to get the best out of his players. He knows what to expect out of his guys, and he demands that respect, demands that accountability to go out there and play good baseball. And I think Josh Hamilton would fit in great there, batting number third. You got good young players like Adam Jones. I just think Baltimore is the best fit for Josh Hamilton, and I hope that's where he ends up. You know, I'm a big Yankees fan, and Baltimore is a threat to us without a doubt, but nonetheless, I like seeing teams win that have good history. Baltimore has good history. Buck Showalter is a great player and became a great manager after that. I love that, and we just, you know, especially, like I said, the young players in Arizona, you know, with Andrew Jones and Matt Wieters and Manny Machado, and you add in Josh Hamilton, you know, maybe at a left field position, man, you're really, really, really looking at Baltimore as being top of the line, possibly even maybe them pushing over the hump of making the World Series.
Yeah, I agree. But Baltimore would be a great fit for him. Here's the thing, like you said, Josh Hamilton, big power guy, 43 home runs last year, 128 RBIs. You know, like you said, 3 years before that, put up good numbers. His average is a little low, I think, at a 285. He's not he's not an on-base guy.
But you don't expect that with Josh Hamilton. That's
Right,
the thing.
right.
He's going to bat 3 or 4 or 5 for you, and he's going to be there to drive in 100 yards
Right.
and hit the ball over the
Right.
fence 40 times a year.
Right.
You know, you're not. And don't discount this guy's defensive ability. This guy plays center field. Okay, he's got mobility because he's got big long strides. You know, how tall is he?
Well, yeah, he's 6'4".
6'4". He's got big strides, and he's got a rocket arm out there.
Yeah.
So don't discount his defensibility on a team. But yeah, as you point out, definitely not a guy you want. If you want a guy to get on the base, you know, a third at the time.
Right, right. The biggest factor I see in Josh Hamilton is I don't think he's happy in Texas. I've seen him play personally a couple times when they've been up to Minnesota and been playing the Twins, and it wasn't the Josh Hamilton you see on SportsCenter highlights. You know, the one time I went, I think he went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. I've seen that happen a lot. I think he's an up and down hitter. I think his personality is the type where if he doesn't really feel like putting a lot of effort in that day, he's not going to. Pitchers have found out if you stay away from him, if you pitch away, if you pitch high and away, low and away, middle away, even if you pitch him low and middle, you're going to have success against him. The thing that pitchers get into problems with is when you pitch him middle in. That's when he's crushing the ball. You don't see him hit a lot of opposite field home runs. He's a pull guy. He pulls that ball. He's from center field to you know, his pull field. So I think Baltimore would be a good fit for him because they got guys around there that hit the ball, that get on base, have a good on base percentage, and all they need to have him do is come up and hit the ball. The thing is he's going to be happy in Baltimore. Is he going to get the money he wants in Baltimore? That's the biggest thing, I think.
I think we look at Hamilton, you know, we know his personality. He's got the history with substance abuse. We know he had a relapse in 2009 that became made public. If he controls this, and then players, coaches, they've all said that he is a great person once he controls this. He's a man of Christian faith. He's got a family. Good person. But when he lets these things get in with him and control him, then that takes him away from baseball, not just baseball, from his life. And that's what Josh Hamilton needs to realize. Where is he going to be happy? Where is he going to enjoy playing baseball and enjoy living with his family? That's what he has to realize first. And to touch on that whole middle end thing, you know, you always have your scouting reports and pitchers, you know, that where he is more apt to hit the ball. But it's just when they make mistakes, Josh Hamilton is a good enough hitter that he can overcome those mistakes,
right,
and take advantage of them,
right,
and take it, you know, and hit the ball well. And you know, you talked about going 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. Well, when you got a guy hitting in the 270s, okay, with a bunch of home runs and a bunch of RBIs, they're going to strike out a lot.
Right.
That's just the nature of the game. But I do see what you're saying. When pitchers make good pitches to anyone, they're going to have success. It's when they make mistakes that Josh Hamilton really can hurt you.
Right, and I agree. I think Josh Hamilton has all the tools in the world to become a great MLB player, a great at-bat, a guy you can consistently count on. You know, he maybe turned the tables a little bit this year with the 43 home runs and 128 RBIs. You know, I don't have a lot of faith in him right now just because of what I've seen of him, you know, in a personal view of him when he's been up against the Minnesota Twins. The Minnesota Twins have not been a good team as of late, but they've had success against Josh Hamilton. I think, but like you've said, like we said about the NFL season, the MLB is a long season, and maybe he does take a day off or two, but I think he's definitely got to turn the page this next year and be a guy that helps lead a team to a World Series.
Yep.
So let's move on to the next big guy, Zach Greinke. Finished his season off in LA this year. Picked up on a trade. LA brought in a good pitcher, helped him make a playoff push. He's a free agent now. Do you think he's going to stay with LA, or do you think his agent's going to get him a good deal elsewhere?
I think he's going to stay in Los Angeles.
I agree.
Not with the Angels.
Really?
I think he's going to cross over and go over to the Dodgers.
Wow.
If he doesn't re-sign with the Angels. Okay, the Angels started playing better throughout the year. Progressed throughout the year. Albert Pujols started playing better throughout the year. And that was a big part of it. Once he started swinging the bat better. Once he started swinging the bat better, he basically was contagious with the rest of the team, and they picked up on it.
Right.
And that's how hitting goes. But I think you pair the Dodgers with the players with like Clayton Kershaw and have a 1-2 punch with Zach Greinke and Kershaw. Holy cow! These players gel together in the field and start hitting the ball. Better watch out. The Los Angeles Dodgers could be very for real next year.
Well, we're going to talk about the Dodgers a little bit later. We got a couple things to touch on them and what their expectations are for next year. But before we move on, like you said, the Angels, I think Zach Greinke is a good fit in there. I think he can be a good pitcher for those guys. One other guy that I want to touch on later that they need to sign is Torrey Hunter. Torrey Hunter's a big key to their outfield. He's a good on-base guy. He doesn't have the power like he used to, but he still is a good hitter. He gets those base hits. He gets those doubles. He gets himself in scoring position for those other guys. Now, that's the biggest thing the Angels need to do is they need to figure out how to get their offense going, to take their pressure off of their pitchers like Zach Greinke. But the Dodgers thing is a very enticing deal for Zach Greinke. He's a great pitcher, had great success in Kansas City playing for a low-budget team, doing the best he could for spent a lot of losing seasons in Kansas City. His lifetime ERA is 3.77, could be a little bit better. His best year was in 2009. I think he got the AL Cy Young that year.
Yep.
Had a 2.16 ERA. Since then, he's been up in the 4s, high 3s, middle 3s. Last year, he had a 3.48 ERA.
Yep.
It's just sometimes when you go from pitching for Kansas City, where you're the number one guy, and you see your teams on a regular basis. He was with Kansas City for 6 years. You see those guys. You can be a good pitcher, and then you go to LA. Play for the Angels. He may have had a stint with the Milwaukee Brewers for a little while, and that really didn't turn out for him so well going into the NL. There's a little bit different how you pitch those guys. I think if he can get settled in with the Los Angeles Anaheim Angels, I think he can be a good pitcher, but let's keep an eye on that Dodgers thing. They're spending a lot of money, and they're bringing guys in. So
well, let's touch on that a little bit more as long as we got talking about it. I think that the Los Angeles Dodgers, there's another guy to me that they possibly could go after is just Zach Greinke. I don't think they make a big, huge splash. I think their splash is as far as position players are already made. But if you look at their lineup, look at their outfield, their depth chart, do they not have one of the most feared teams in the league? Have to be. You look from left to right in the outfield. Carl Crawford, Matt Kemp, Andre Ethier. We're looking at Matt Kemp was a possible Triple Crown candidate, a possible MVP candidate for a while until he was injured. Carl Crawford, we know how good he is. Andre Ethier is a good player. And then you talk about Hanley Ramirez at short, Adrian Gonzalez at first base. Okay. Mark Ellis is playing second for him. Definitely not a superstar, but a good, solid.
He fits in with that unit.
Yeah, he fits in because he's not going to have to demand all the money, he'll be fine batting 9th, batting 8th, wherever they bat in the lineup. He's a good, solid team player. And then they got this guy, Luis Cruz, who is another guy that they bring in there. He made his debut about 4 years ago. That he's just a solid young player for him playing third base. And these guys, let me look at their pitching. We talk about it. Clayton Kershaw, Chad Billingsley, They got Josh Beckett. Don't forget, these guys got Josh Beckett in that trade as well. They got a lot of Red Sox players in that deal. And, you know, Aaron Herring, Ted Willie, some of them guys. Bring in Greinke, throw him in there. Does it really matter? I mean, can't these guys win the West? I mean, the Giants won the West, but are the Giants that extremely powerful? I know they're win. Like I said, not to take away from the Giants, but I really think that expectations for the Giants, or for the Dodgers, excuse me, should be very high in Los Angeles. They got Magic Johnson, a new owner. They got new players. The stands should be full. They should be making some money to pay for all these players. A prediction, you know what? I think they can win 90 games. I think there's potential to win 95 to 100 games if they get rolling, but it could also blow up and they could win 80 or less.
Right. Well, you know, I read an article last week that Jason Stark had put out there about the Los Angeles Dodgers, and one of the things he said is these aren't your Frank McCourt Dodgers that just came out of bankruptcy court. You had a group of, like you said, Irvin Magic Johnson, Caston, the Guggenheim group that came in and purchased the Los Angeles Dodgers for somewhere around $2 billion. I think it was $2.15 billion. You know, the next highest offer was like 1.1 or 1.2 billion dollars for this team, and they just came in and with a $2 billion offer and bought this team, and they've made some, like you said, they've made some big splashes. One thing that Jason Stark also touched on is, are they kind of taking an outlook like the Yankees used to? Let's spend the money. Let's bring these guys in here. 2013, their payroll is $181.3 million, $50 million more than what the New York Yankees are spending. Next year after that, the Yankees are at $73.5 million. The Dodgers are over $100 million again, $128.7 million, $50 million more than the Yankees again. They're spending the money. They want to win. They want to win now. They want to prove that their $2.5 billion purchase was worth the $2.5 billion. That big trade they made with Red Sox, you touched on. I think there are very high expectations for the Los Angeles Dodgers out in LA this year, and I hope they come out. I hope they exceed those expectations. You know, I'm a Minnesota Twins fan, but it's fun to see those teams like the Los Angeles Dodgers come back out of the shadows and be a good team again. I think a Dodgers-Yankees World Series would be one of the most viewed World Series in a long time.
You touched on it before, the Dodgers with the larger payroll than the Yankees. You know, it is what it is. People are going to be a little more, want to say, allowing, a little more accepting is probably the better word, of the Dodgers having this huge payroll because they are not the Yankees. Because they haven't been the team that's dominated the World Series championships in the history of their career. Now, they were the Brooklyn Dodgers before Los Angeles, but they've been in LA for quite a while. They've had chances to win. They've been successful, not for quite a while. But the thing is with the Dodgers, people aren't realizing, like I said, they're just not the Yankees. They haven't won. Now, it is what it is, okay? No salary cap means you have to spend money to compete. It's stupid not to. I don't see why these teams are in there, you know, they're in the playoffs for a couple years and they're not, then they build back up 5 years later and they're in it for a couple years. Maybe they win a championship, then they're out. Look at Chicago White Sox is a good example.
Absolutely.
Florida Marlins is a good example. Okay. The Colorado Rockies made a push to the World Series one time. All right. Oakland's been in the playoffs, been relevant before, then they took a few years out. They were back last year. But think about the Yankees. Sure, they don't win it every year, but they're there every year. The Yankees are relevant. Okay, and is it because they have to spend money? Is it because they buy their championships? Okay, so you're basically saying that you're given the opportunity to pay as much money as you possibly want to win, but you're not going to do it because you don't want to have a competitive advantage. Life is a competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
If you're a billionaire like George Steinbrenner was, why wouldn't you go out there and pay the big money for Sabathia, for Alex Rodriguez, for Mark Teixeira? Okay? They're going to pay big money to keep Robinson Cano on their team. Why would you not do it? They're going to get it somewhere else. What's the difference if you have 3 players and another team has 1 at that big market value sum? It's no different than LA. LA's going to do the same thing, like you said, $50 million more than the Yankees. But nobody is going to accuse LA of buying their players. It will not happen because the LA Dodgers have not won. Now, they win 3 championships in the next 5 years, they're going to start getting accused of buying their players. But the thing is, the Yankees have won. We saw them win 3 in a row at the end of the 90s. someone won in 2009, they're going to be there every year and have a chance to win. And that's why we frown upon the Yankees spending all that money, is because they win. It's not because they just do it. Had they have 7 world championships instead of 27, we're not having this talk.
Well, I think I think the biggest thing on when people say, yeah, the Yankees buy their championship, I think LA is going to get, if they win it, they're probably not going to say no, they didn't go out and buy their championship. But if they don't win it, the salary cap, or the salary that they pay out if they don't win it, is definitely going to be touched on. If they spend, they're spending 181 million and 128 million and 83 million over the next 3 years, and they don't see any progress, they're going to take a lot of flack for that. The thing that you want to touch on is when you talk about, yes, there is no salary cap in baseball. Every team has the same opportunity to spend as much money as you want. You look at Minnesota. Their owner has been, if you look at strictly bottom line, net income, he's been the most profitable owner for the last 10 years because he doesn't spend the money. And that's his choice. People still go to Minnesota Twins games. Their stands are full every season, every home game, because they have a dedicated fan base. In New York, if you don't spend that money and you don't bring in the big names, I don't think you get the same following. So they have to bring those names in. They have to spend that money. But the thing I'm just trying to get at is, people say if you have a salary cap, you have a more competitive league. Yeah, that's fine. But it's not like the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Rangers are the only ones that have a chance to spend this money because they're so much richer than everybody else. I think every team in the MLB has a chance to pay that kind of money. It's just whether they want to.
Here's the difference, and I'm going to disagree with the fact that I think the Yankees have just as more dedicated, and I know they have more dedicated fan base than the Minnesota Twins. You go to games in Kansas City, even in Minnesota. You go to games in smaller cities, smaller big cities is what I should say.
Right.
There's Yankee fans there. There's Yankee fans all over the country.
Well,
and the reason that the stands are full in New York, even on the year they missed the playoffs, there's still sellouts, there's still fans in the stands. It's because it's a huge city.
Race.
It's a huge city. They weren't in the playoff race. The year that they lost, the year they closed down Yankee Stadium, 2008, the year Joe Torre's last year, they were not in the playoff race. They were like 8 games out of the wild card in September. Not in it at all. Might have been even more than that. They finished just above 500. Might have been right at 500. These guys were not good. Okay? Irrelevant. Beside the point. Okay? The Yankees spend the money because they make the money. Everyone else, like you said, has the same chance. Okay? Ticket sales. The average person can go to a Minnesota Twins game because he doesn't have to pay an arm and a leg to go watch him play. Now, the Twins owner wants that so he can have the average guy go to a game, take his family to a game, eat a hot dog at the game. Now, you talk about, like I said, we're really boiling it down to hot dogs, and it seems kind of silly, but in the essence, when you go to Minnesota, you go buy a hot dog, you pay $4. You go buy a beer, you pay $7. I'm sitting here thinking, that is a lot of money. You go to Yankee Stadium, it's $14 for a beer. Now, here's the thing. If you charge it, people will still pay for it. I go to a game and I want a hot dog, I want a beer, I'm still going to pay the money, whether I have to pay $7 or $14. And when you're talking about little things like that, that adds up and makes more money to spend. Now, definitely don't blame the Minnesota Twins owner for charging that, and it's vendors, but they do get a cut. They do have some say. Okay, they do have some say. Look at the field. Target Field, sponsored by Target. Bunch of money from them that have to be paid to Target, or Target may pay for the advertising. That's fine. But when you have your own stadium like Yankee Stadium, like Fenway Park, you're getting all that revenue, and that's money that they still make. Now, now George Steinbrenner makes money with his business, or excuse me, the late George Steinbrenner, the Steinbrenner family make money with the business in other ways, not just Yankees baseball. But I'm just pointing out the fact that you do this thing, and the Twins are benefited. That's the thing. The small market clubs are benefited by these big market teams paying a lot of money. It's called revenue sharing. And I think a lot of people are arrogant to the fact that, the Yankees go spend a bunch of money or make a bunch of money. They in essence have to pay basically a tax that gets divided to all the rest of the teams in Major League Baseball, and that covers a portion of the Twins' payroll.
Right, but in the same sense, the Twins are paying that too, just not as big as a chunk. I mean, we can go way into depth on, we can go even into the tax bracket on the political side of things that Obama wants to do. And, the Yankees pay more because they make more. The Twins, you kind of got, that's kind of a wash there because the Twins are paying into that payroll or to that revenue sharing too. The thing of the difference is you have different clientele coming to a Yankees game than you have to coming to a Minnesota Twins game. You have blue collar people coming to a Minnesota Twins game. You have white collar people coming to a New York Yankees game. You have Wall Street guys. You have CEOs. You have presidents of companies. Those guys are paying the big dollar tickets, paying those $14 hot dogs, $10 beers. So, I mean, in essence, like I said, every team has the same chance to pay out the money they want for those big name players. It's just the Yankees are actually. I like what the Yankees do. I have no problem with what the Yankees are doing. The Yankees are taking advantage. They're taking a chance. Like you said, it's competition. It's the lifeblood of America is competition. So they're putting out the money because they have it. I mean, Donald Trump has the money, so he puts up however many hotels he wants. People come to there because it's a Donald Trump name. Yeah. He's putting up the hotels. He has the chance to do that. Everybody has the same opportunity to make money in this world. It's just what chances you take.
Here's the thing that I want to point out to you though, and that's we might just have to disagree on it. You know what? Yeah, it is a wash, but the fact is the Yankees are paying more money. And when we're talking income tax, not by Major League Baseball, but by the federal government, then yes, I don't feel it's fair to tax certain people more because they make more, tax them a higher percentage than the guy that makes less. I personally don't feel that's fair. That's a political standpoint. That's irrelevant. Bottom line is every team is taxed at 31% on MLB revenue sharing. That's how it works. I thought the percentage was, I was the one to say about 15 of their net revenue. Okay,
right.
Their net local revenue.
Right.
I wanted to say it was about 15, so obviously I was way off on this fact. But a lot of people don't even know that there is a revenue share.
Well, right.
Okay, but it's 31% of their net revenue, and that money is divided up and distributed equally to the teams. But the top 16 teams by 2016 will not be receiving this revenue. Okay, so basically they pool all 30. I believe there's 32 Major League Baseball teams. Okay, they pool all these teams together in this pool, and they take each one of their 31% of their net revenue, and they put it into another pool. All right. Then they take the top 16 teams and take the cheapest, the lower market 16 teams, and take all that money distributed equally. That's the way it's going to work in 2016. Okay. So the teams like the Twins, teams like the A's, teams like the Rays, these teams are going to benefit from the Yankees spending so much money.
Right.
They already are now.
Right.
But they're going to benefit a hell of a lot more. And that's where when I see all these Twins fans out and about come up to me and, oh, the Yankees lose, the Yankees buy their championships. Well, guess what? We're helping you go re-sign Joe Mauer and helping you re-sign Josh Willingham in a couple years. And bottom line is, it's the truth. The Yankees are essentially helping the Twins do that. If you say you aren't, you're overlooking the fact that the money that they spend, in essence, comes back and helps the Twins, helps a small market.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if necessarily the money they get from that revenue sharing goes directly to their payroll. I would find that hard to believe.
It's not necessarily saying it goes to the payroll, but it goes to the organization, it goes to the team. They have to use it somewhere. You wouldn't think they're just sitting on it.
Right, but if, like I said before, if the Minnesota Twins owner is the highest, is the most from a net income standpoint.
You're saying he's pocketing it.
No, I'm saying from a net income standpoint, at the end of the year, his net income is higher than the Yankees' net income because his payroll is cheaper. He's paying his players less, and he's making more money on merchandise sales or whatever. His net income. So his net income, the Twins' net income, is higher than what the Yankees' net income is.
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
It is. He's been the most profitable owner the last 5 years.
Most profitable. But where's New York? How far down is New York? That's what I'm saying. Not saying he might be above New York. That's not the argument. What I'm saying is it's not like it's a gaping $1 million worth of difference. That's what I'm arguing.
Well, look at the difference in the payroll between the
that's very fine. That's very true.
Right.
Very true. But I would think that the Yankees make, yeah, you want to say most profitable. That's very fine for you to say that.
So he's essentially paying more into that revenue sharing than the Yankees are.
Very true. Very true.
So I don't know what I mean.
But here's the thing. I'm not talking owner standpoint. I'm talking fan standpoint. Is that the Yankees' fault that the owner is?
No.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Oh, right.
That's all I'm trying to point out. I didn't understand. I didn't really You know, if he's the richest, or
Well, I'm not
you know,
saying the
richest,
richest.
the
I'm
most,
not saying the
right,
richest.
I saw the search, but the most profitable, you know, that's very fine. But I think what we have to really ultimately decipher and come down upon is where is this money going then? Because what I want to know is why isn't he spending it? You know,
Right. Yeah, I don't know why he's not spending it. I mean, yeah, I can't answer that question on where that revenue sharing money that each team gets goes to. I mean, you talk about, okay, so say the Yankees make their net revenue at the end of the year is $1 million. 31% of that, $310,000, goes into this pool and is split between 32 teams.
right now.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, that's really not a whole lot of money if you want. I mean, if they're the most, if they put the most into that pool at $310,000, that's not a lot of money to split up between 32 teams.
It's not a lot of money, but it's still something that they're doing to basically spread
And
the
is that
wealth.
the
It's
thing?
basically to spread the wealth and to.
The question
it's
I
for
have
parity.
is
It's for parity. The Major League Baseball wants their league to be more basically even. They want equal chances to each team.
Right.
They want to give money to teams, and maybe it's something that they want to do that. So teams like the Minnesota Twins owner, who doesn't spend a lot of money on his team, maybe goes, well, I'm just gonna have to pay more to revenue sharing unless I make my net income a little smaller.
Well, the other question I have is that revenue sharing money. I think in the NFL it works this way because the NFL has the same thing. The NFL has to pay into a revenue sharing thing. Does that go into their players' retirement fund, their 401k, their insurance for when they retire? You know, all of that. Is that where that money? Because I think that's where that money would go to. Because I think that's what the NFL
don't
does.
know where it goes. Bottom line, what I was trying to point out is the fact that the money is shared from the small market to the large market and vice versa. You know, it's not something that it's a 100% advantage to be cheap and not spend money on players, and it's not a 100% advantage to go and spend a bunch of money on a bunch of players.
Right.
It's just a matter of what you want to do, to compete. To compete, you have to spend the money. You know, we see these small market teams make the World Series every once in a while. When do they win it? Florida Marlins won a World Series, won 2 World Series. It's in the last 20 years. Okay,
Right.
we're talking 20 years of baseball.
Right.
When does a small market team win it?
Well,
You
the
want to
Twins
argue?
won it in '91.
Man, that's over 20 years ago. I'm just pointing out that in the last
Right.
20 years.
Right.
Okay, here's another one, Arizona. But are they really small market? Don't know Arizona's finances, but I want to consider them as a small market club. Small market clubs to me are the Royals, the Twins, the Oakland A's, the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, have the A's, Rays, and Twins had success? Absolutely.
Right.
But have they won a World Series? No. Bottom line is professional sports, college sports comes down to national championships. Okay? World championships. If you don't win it, basically, to some extent, your season is not a success. Do you think Billy Beane was satisfied losing in the
No.
playoffs this year?
No.
Do you think Billy Beane was satisfied losing in the playoffs when they made the runs with Johnny Damon? Okay?
Right.
When they made the runs with the three-headed monster with Harden, Zito, and Hudson.
Right.
No. He wanted to win that world championship. He wasn't saying, don't get me wrong, you watch the movie Hardball, and you see everyone coming up to him saying, Moneyball. And you see guys coming up to him and saying, oh, we made a good run, good job, proud of you. And he's sitting there thinking, what can I do to come over that step and win the world championship?
Right.
So to say that world championship is not the goal is completely ignorant.
No, I agree.
And you're looking over the fact that that's what you want to do in Major League Baseball, in any professional sport.
Well, yeah, I think we both agree that, you know, every team has the same opportunity to spend the money. It's just whether they want to or not. It's what, you know, the owner has the last say in how much money you're going to spend. And if a manager can't get that money to spend, or can't get that money to go get those players, then he has to work with what he's got. So hand it to the Yankees for spending the money to win those World Series, and hand it to the Dodgers. Let's see if it pans out for them.
We'll have to see.
Well, that wraps it up for MLB. We're going to move on to college football next after this short break. Lots to talk about in college football. 1 unbeaten goes down. 3 remain. Who's your national championship?
Don't be afraid. As soon as you see this, send us your tweets, DBLD Sports Show. Let's talk about who you think will be in the national championship. And you stay tuned, because that argument we just had is going to be very minimal compared to the next one that's going to happen just shortly. So stick around. Double D Sports Show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. Going to touch on some college football. One unbeaten goes down. Texas A&M takes down Alabama this week. Big win for the Aggies. Texas A&M. You know, Johnny Football comes through. I heard they're trying to trademark that or get a licensing on that, like Tim Tebow did on his Tebowing with Johnny Football. But anyway, Alabama goes down. 3 unbeatens remain. New BCS standings come out. I thought for sure Oregon was going to be number 1, but they weren't. K-State jumps up to number 1. Oregon number 2. Notre Dame number 3, and Alabama drops to number 4. Big speculation here is who's going to be in your national championship game as we wind down the season. Is it going to be Oregon? Is it going to be K-State? Is it going to be Notre Dame? Who's going to be in there?
Just go back a little bit. Let's back up a little bit. We talked about Texas A&M beating Bama. Okay, we were sitting there watching the game, and we watched the first 3 quarters, I'd say. We sat there and watched, flipping back and forth between the Huskers and Penn State and A&M and Bama. And as I watched this game, I just never fully believed they were going to pull it off. There was always that shadow of a doubt, just a little bit of me that just thought, Alabama's going to pull this out. Yeah. Alabama's going to make it happen. Yeah. I figured they'd even score, and then they were down 20-0. Okay? They were down by 20 points. And I just had a feeling they would come back. I told you that. I sat there and said, Alabama will make a run.
Well, and it was a matter of minutes. I mean, we were watching, like you said, we were watching the Nebraska and Penn State game, and we flipped over, and A&M was up 20-0. We go back to the Nebraska game. All of a sudden, it's
20-0 at half, or 20-14 at halftime.
Yeah.
And then 20-0 in the first quarter. They scored 20 points in the first quarter. Scored 20. They scored 9 in the second half.
Yeah, they scored. A&M scored 20 in the first quarter, went scoreless in the second and the third, and then scored 9 in the fourth quarter.
And what they ended up doing, they got a touchdown. They only threw a touchdown pass. I don't know if he had a safety. I think that's the next point. Got a field goal. I think they got a field goal on it. They might have went for 2 to try to go up. They went for 2 to try to go up 31-24, and ended up with 29. Yep. But Johnny Manziel, he's worth all the hype. You know, we heard about how good he was, and he didn't disappoint. And we're going to discuss on him a little bit more in the show when we get talking Heisman ballot, because this guy's obviously putting himself in position that, especially if A&M keeps winning. We'll get to that a little bit more later. But back to what you said about the BCS rankings. We'll talk about the remaining schedule for these teams. Okay, Kansas State. First time under Bill Snyder, they're ranked number 1 in the BCS. How can you not cheer for this guy?
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
K-State, Baylor. Okay, Baylor's 4-5. You have to believe that they're going to win that game.
Yep.
Finish with number 15, Texas, who's 8-2, but they do get to play Texas at home. I think these guys are going to finish 12-0.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
I really have a good feeling in Kansas State. I think they're going to come out and finish 12-0. And a little technical difficulty there. We apologize for that here on Double D Sports Show. But we're not quite like Mike and Mike where we get our stuff hired.
Yeah, absolutely not. We got to do our own research here.
Do our own research and do our own
audio and our own
audio and video technical work. So we apologize for that. But it's a tough test at home. They're 8-2. I still pick Kansas State to win them and go 12-0. What do you got Kansas State finishing?
I'd have to agree. I think their biggest battle is going to be against Texas at the end of the year. You know, Texas number 15. You know, they're a good football team, and I think they can give them a good run. If they can win that game, you know, definitely 12-0. They're deserving of being in a national championship.
Here's the thing you got to remember with Texas, with Kansas State, no Big 12 championship game. So that could play into the hands of Oregon. You know, to me, let's get to Oregon. I'm going to jump in with them real quick. 59-17 win over Cal. Okay? Watch the game. See the game. 24-17 in the third quarter with like 4 minutes left in the third quarter.
Right.
Wow factor on offense for the Oregon Ducks. These guys are unbelievable on offense. I mean, there's not another better offense out there, and I question if any defense can stop them, but I think there's one that can. We'll get there a little bit later, but I just think next week at home against Stanford and Oregon State in the Civil War. All right, they got 2 tough tests.
They do.
But I just think that their offense is too good that I think they're going to win both those games. The possible rematch with USC in the Pac-12 title game. They might have to play UCLA depending on the UCLA-USC game.
Yep.
And quite frankly, I think they can win out. I think they will, and I think their offense is too much to stop for those teams. I think they're going to win out and finish 13-0, and that puts them, to me, at number 1 in the polls if they go 13-0. Just because Notre Dame or Kansas State, if they go undefeated, will follow in behind, but they'll only have 12 wins. They won't play that extra game. So that, to me, gives Oregon enough to jump. If let's say, Kansas State and Notre Dame drop a game, then Bama wins out and wins the SEC title game. Bama's in the national championship to me, with 1 loss over Notre Dame or K-State because of the strength of schedule and because of the team. I feel like they're a better team anyways. But they're playing Oregon, but they're number 2 because Oregon has that extra win and undefeated, and that's huge. Now we talked about Oregon though. What do you think? How do you see Oregon finishing?
Oregon, they got a game against Stanford. They finish up their season with a game against Stanford at home, and then they go to Oregon State. Stanford's playing good football. They've been a good team all year. They've stayed in the top 25 ranking all year. I think they can give them a challenge, but once again, the offense of Oregon is going to be too much for Stanford to handle. It's going to be a shootout. Excuse me. I think it's going to be a close shootout. I think it's going to be a USC-Oregon type of a game where Oregon's going to win 62-51 or 62-50 something, something like that. Oregon State, on the other hand, I think this is the one chance that Oregon's got a chance to lose. I think Oregon State's going to come in here with motivation. They always play Oregon tough, in-state rivals. If I would pick them to lose a game, I think it's gonna be Oregon State, and I hope it is. I want to be cheering for Oregon State because I want Notre Dame in that national championship game. Not because just I'm a little bit of a fan of Notre Dame, but I think it's good for college football that Notre Dame's back in there. So that's what I think about Oregon. Notre Dame, they don't have an easy schedule by any means either. They gotta be Wake Forest next week, and then they gotta be USC. USC might have a little motivation going into that last game, depending on what happens with UCLA. I honestly hope USC beats you at UCLA, because just for the fact that they don't want to end the season on a losing note on a 3-game losing streak, essentially. So, it's going to be a fun last 2 weeks of college football. But like you said, I think I'd have to agree with you. If K-State or Notre Dame drops one of these last 2 weeks, I think Alabama definitely jumps back up into that national championship talk. But if you have 3 undefeated teams, K-State, Oregon, Notre Dame, I don't see how, if K-State wins out, Oregon wins out, Notre Dame wins out, I don't see how you can jump any one of those teams. I think it's going to end right there.
Yeah.
And it'd probably be, unfortunately, honestly, I think Notre Dame would probably jump Oregon. Notre Dame gets the benefit of the doubt no matter what. How many years in the past has Notre Dame been in a BCS bowl game when they had no right being there? A few years ago when they played Hawaii in a BCS bowl game, Hawaii took it to them. They didn't have no business being there. Notre Dame always gets benefit of the doubt in the BCS bowls. I think it'd be if all 3 teams went out, I think K-State is on the outside looking in. I think you're looking at an Oregon Notre Dame national championship.
I guess if that happens, I'm going to be pretty upset with the computers, with the pollsters, with everything, because I'm just not convinced with Notre Dame. They just don't win the way that I want to see them win. They're not pounding teams like Kansas State is. They're not pounding teams like Oregon is. I don't like it. You know what? We talk about the wins. 21-6, they beat Boston College. It was on the road, but it's Boston College, okay?
Yeah, but Boston College has played them tough no matter what. How many times has Boston College knocked Notre Dame off of their undefeated season?
Where are we going to talk about this? How many times has, how many years in a row has Oklahoma taken it to Kansas State? Kansas State went down there and beat them. So did Notre Dame. Not the point. Not going to get at that. Okay? Oregon, yeah, Cal played them tough for a little bit, but Oregon just exploded and blew them out of the water. That's what we're talking about. Okay? Boston College is 2-8. They're 2-8. Okay? They're not 500. They're not just bowl eligible with 4 losses. Okay? They're 2-8. You don't win 21-6 against a 2-8 team if you're going to play in a national title. You know what? Maybe this year's different. Maybe the quality isn't as good. That might be why Notre Dame's number 3. Because quite frankly, they're not a number 3 team in my book, as opposed to what I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing number 3 teams that are 10-0 that are killing teams. Okay, Notre Dame, now they win. They do win. I'll give you that. 100%. Notre Dame wins. And that's the main thing. And now they're, like you said, they're getting Wake Forest. Wake Forest is 500. I have no doubt that they're going to beat Wake Forest. They close the year with USC. That's where I see this coming to an end. And we're going to have a fun time next week breaking down the preview for it. And then the Monday after that, breaking down what actually happens in that game. But I think we're going to come back in 2 weeks from now. Notre Dame, 11-1 record. USC will knock them up. You write it down, pencil it on paper. That is not going to happen. Notre Dame will not go undefeated.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think they do go undefeated. And no, they're not blowing teams out, but you know what? They don't have to blow. They don't have.
It'd be different if it was in South Bend, but they got to go on the road. Okay, they got to go on the road. Matt Barkley is the last game in the Coliseum. Okay, all these good offensive playmakers for USC. They're going to put up points. Here's the thing.
Well, that's what you said. That's what everybody said about Oklahoma, that they were going to outscore. There's no way Notre Dame was going to be able to handle the Oklahoma offense.
I do not think Oklahoma can compare to USC. USC has lost to Oregon. Okay, USC, they've lost some games that maybe they shouldn't have lost. But I can make a case in every USC loss. Okay, we look at it. Stanford. Stanford's a good team, yeah. Or Notre Dame beat Stanford. What was the Notre Dame Stanford score?
Notre Dame Stanford 20-13. Notre Dame won in overtime.
Okay, and USC loses by 7. Does that mean Notre Dame is an automatic 14-point favorite? Do you think Notre Dame goes to USC and wins by 14 points?
No, I think they win in a 17-10 or a 17 or a 10 or 14-3 game. I just think Notre Dame's defense is too damn. Monte Teo, you cannot argue with Monte Teo. He is a Heisman candidate.
Absolutely.
This guy is a defensive player that's a Heisman candidate. He is the heart and soul of that defense.
Absolutely. Nothing away from Monte Teo, but we can agree that Stanford's a good football team.
Yeah,
I can agree that Oregon is obviously a good football team.
Yeah.
Those are 2 losses for USC that I give them the pass on. I do. Not as a national. I'm not saying they should play for a national title. I'm saying they can beat Notre Dame. We're gonna see it. It's gonna play it out. It's a primetime game. Last week of the season, Saturday, November 27th on 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock if you're in the blistery cold Midwest like we are. And it's going to be on ABC. So turn it over to Channel 13 and check that game out in a couple weeks. Until then, we're just going to have to argue about it. National championship. Who you got in the national championship game?
National championship, like I said.
Right now.
Right now, as the schedule sits, you got to put Kansas State and Oregon in there. But
but as you make the picks, you're basically saying that all 3 teams are going to win out, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm
putting
Oregon and Notre Dame in the national championship when all 3 teams win out.
Okay.
And it's just because you picked the 2 best teams in the nation, and it's tough to say. I'd love to see K-State in there, but I just don't think they get the votes that Oregon gets or Notre Dame gets.
Here's what I want to ask. Okay, and maybe this is a defense. Why you're going to see Oregon with 13-0? They're obviously going to be, because K-State and Notre Dame are going to be 12-0 each.
Right.
Okay. How do you see Notre Dame in 2 weeks and 2 wins, jumping 2 spots to pass K-State when K-State wins those 2 games as well?
That's just the way, like I said before, it's just the way the computers are going to work it out. They give Notre Dame the benefit of the doubt every single time. There's times they came in as a #1 preseason poll. With Brady Quinn's senior year, they came in #1 preseason rankings, #1. No. They had no business being.
But that's not a computer ranking. That's an AP, Associated Press, USA Today. BCS rankings don't actually come out until about week 8.
Okay.
But I see where you're going.
Right. That's what I mean. I think
Notre Dame is, but that could come back to hurt them. That could come back to hurt them this year, simply for the fact that, you know what?
Well, when the season started, Notre Dame had the #1 toughest schedule. But as they continued to win, they beat Michigan at Michigan State when Michigan State was number 10. They beat Michigan the week after that. And then all of a sudden, once Notre Dame's beating these teams, they say, oh, well, Michigan State isn't as good as we thought. Michigan isn't as good as we thought.
Michigan State is not as good as we thought, though.
Yeah, but so how can you say that at the beginning of the year, Oh, they got the number one toughest
Coming
schedule,
in-
and now they got. Oh, now they don't have the number one
Because
toughest
the way
schedule.
it worked out, Michigan State is 5-5. They are not a good football team. That's not a quality win. Quality wins, it's no different.
What were they ranked? What were they ranked when they played them?
They were ranked number 10 at the time they played them.
So that's not a quality win at
That's
the
a
time
quality,
they played them.
yeah,
That's not a quality
right.
win.
But when we look back, you got to pass the eye test. And when we look back at the end of the year to see the two best teams in college football with the most quality signature wins, the Michigan win's going to be huge. The Michigan win will come back and help Notre Dame, no matter what anyone says, because Michigan is 7-3, and if they win this last game and go 8-3 and finish with 11 game schedule 8-3, that's going to be a big win for Notre Dame. But the Miami Florida win, not gonna matter. Okay, the win against Michigan State is going to be irrelevant. You know what? Stanford could end up with 4 or 5 losses. If they end up with 4 or 5 losses, and I'm saying that with all respect to Stanford, I know they're sitting at 8-2 right now. Okay, maybe not 5 losses, but they got Oregon and UCLA to close the year. You know what? Stanford could be looked at as, they're 8-4. That's not that great of a win. Now it's a good win, but it's not as good as it could be as if Stanford finishes 10-2 or 11-1.
Okay.
And then the other thing I want to point out, I'd like to say my national championship. The reason I say it like this, you know what? Kansas State could drop a game to Texas. Oregon could drop any one of its last 3 games against Stanford, against Oregon State, and against USC or UCLA. I don't feel like they will. Now that being said, Notre Dame, if they win out, is on the outside looking in. They will be in there if one of them loses. I don't think Notre Dame wins out. I think the top 2 go undefeated, play for the national title. Notre Dame's going to drop a game. They're going to see them probably play, possibly even Alabama, maybe with a matchup against Alabama, and that's going to be huge for Notre Dame. Not just because might even be a little bit more than not like a national championship. I don't want to say that, but it'd be a huge game because then we're going to see, can they compete with the top dogs? Can they really compete? You know what? If they go in there and get blown out by 30 points, you're going to know that all along, Notre Dame was kind of just playing lesser competition. But they go in there and win the game, or at least compete till the end, then we're going to look at it and go, hey, the Irish are back, actually.
Right.
And that's something that, like you said, it would be great for college football, but I think you have to give credit where credit is due. K-State, Oregon, and I think Kansas State's a team that I think they go in there and I think they can win a title. And it'd be great. It'd be a great way to Bill Snyder to probably ride off in the sunset and retire. We see Kansas State outscoring opponents 42-17, Oregon 54-22. So probably going to be a high-scoring game. But I give the edge to the Heisman Trophy favorite with Colin Klein, and I think I trust Kansas State's defense more than Oregon. So I'd have that win in the game. So I'm going to ask you. You had Notre Dame and Oregon. You got winning the title.
Notre Dame, Oregon, my pick for the national championship game. I think it's I think if anybody can slow down, I'm not saying shut down, I'm going to say slow down the Oregon offense, it's going to be the Notre Dame defense. I mean, they've done it with Michigan, they did it with Stanford, they did it with Oklahoma. They got a defense that can shut down high-powered offenses. It's going to be a close game. In the end, I'd love to pick Notre Dame. I'd love to pick Notre Dame with a 24-21 win or 24-17 win over Oregon. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think Oregon's got too much firepower and too many different ways to score that Notre Dame would struggle with. I'd have to pick Oregon winning the national championship game if it was Notre Dame and Oregon in there. That's who I would pick is Oregon.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to just wait and see how that plays out.
It's going to be a fun 2 weeks, that's for sure. Another thing to watch is Nebraska and Michigan, or Nebraska and who else is battling for that Big Ten?
Michigan.
Yeah.
Nebraska and Michigan working out for the leaders lead. We saw Nebraska come out and basically, finally, I mean, they find a way to win. That's the thing. That's the difference in Nebraska, and that's what I like. I think Bo Pelini did a great job. I think he saved his job because we look back at these games. If you want to look at these games, we're talking Penn State. They won 32-23, 9-point win, but it took till fourth quarter to finally take the lead. Michigan State, fourth quarter to take the lead. They dominated Michigan, but they barely snuck out a win against Northwestern, barely snuck out a win against Wisconsin. They was beat Iowa State 73-7, some beat Arkansas State 42-13, Southern Miss 49-20. I don't want to see those wins. I want to see them beat Wisconsin. I want to see them beat Northwestern, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, just like they are. They've lost one game in conference this year. They're 5-1 in the conference. control their own destiny.
Yep.
Minnesota and Iowa left in the schedule. They're going to go 7-1. They're going to have a 10-2 season. Go to the Big 12 championship game. Play in Wisconsin, Big 10. Play in Wisconsin, a team they already beat once. I think they can beat them again. You know what? We could possibly see a Nebraska-Cornhusker team 11-2 going to the Rose Bowl.
Absolutely.
And if the cards fall right, we might see them taking on Oregon. We might see them taking on Oregon, because if Notre Dame and Kansas State say we're to get the national championship, or Alabama if Oregon slaps a game or whatever,
right.
then we're really going to see if Nebraska, we're going to see what they're tested against. But I feel like people are taking too much away. I think Penn State's a good football team. I think Michigan State is not a good football team. But here's the thing. You talk about it is a conference game. It's still a big win. Just same as Northwestern. Not that great of a team, even though they were ranked 24 this week. But it's still a conference win. But Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Wisconsin, I feel like are signature wins for Nebraska. And we saw them lose to UCLA. UCLA has 2 losses right now.
Yeah, UCLA
that
is a
turned
good
out
team.
to be, at time, a huge loss.
Yep.
But as it turns out, see, that's kind of the reverse psychology of the Notre Dame method. We saw Nebraska lose early, didn't look very good, but as the year went on, it looked a little better. Notre Dame won early, looked really good. As the year went on, it didn't look so good. That's the difference, and that's where we're comparing that. And you never know. Notre Dame's a team that could be a big ticket seller in Pasadena that could get invited to the Rose Bowl if the Pac-12 team is in a national title game, meaning then we'd see Nebraska and Notre Dame maybe square off, and that'd be a good thing for college football.
Yeah, oh yeah, I agree 100%. You know, as we said earlier, there's a lot that could play out these last 2 weeks of college football. College football is always an exciting sport for me. I mean, these guys are playing on Saturday. They're playing their hearts out so they can play on Sunday, but they're also playing for Heisman trophies and national championships and playing for their school. So college football is always fun. It's a great time of the year to be a sports fan. I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on. College football coming down to an end. NFL really getting into things. A lot of stuff in the MLB with free agency. NBA really getting kind of getting started, getting to the swing of things. We're going to move into that direction now as we talk about
Before we go to that, I got to ask you one thing. I want to touch on this. We kind of do it. We've done it every week, and we'll probably continue to do it. The Heisman Trophy balloting. What is it? Colin Klein's? Is it Is it really? Johnny Manziel is making a big push. His stats actually, if you look at it, to me, 2,780 yards as opposed to 2,020 yards for Colin Klein. So 700 yards more. He's thrown 6 more touchdowns, but also 3 more picks. And he's also doesn't have the rushing touchdowns because he only has 15 as opposed to Colin Klein's 19. So the stats kind of balance out. But what I want to know is, does Johnny Manziel make a case, or if Colin Klein goes 12-0 and puts his team in the national title game, does he have it locked down?
I think if Colin Klein, if he takes his team 12-0 and they get into the national championship game, I really don't see how you can't give it to him. I mean, yes, Johnny Manziel has made a great case for himself. Johnny football leading his team to a win against Alabama, a big win against Alabama that could, possibly, depending how the schedules play out. I mean, you never know. All 3 of these top teams might lose a game, and Alabama's right back into the mix of things for the national championship.
Absolutely.
You never know. But as of right now, that's a big win for Texas A&M, a big win on Johnny Manziel's resume. But in the end, I think Colin Klein, I don't see him leading Kansas State. As I said last week, Kansas State is a Midwest team that Bill Snyder has taken from absolutely nothing to national recognition.
Here's what I want to point out, and I'm going to look you right straight in the eye, and you got to understand this, okay? All you SEC homers out there, take this, and you can go, and you can fly a kite. Because here's the bottom line, all right? You say all along, the regular season is a playoff, all right? We don't need playoffs because the regular season is a playoff. And we talked about a little bit earlier, one of my friends, huge LSU fan, all right? So what I want to know is, if the regular season's a playoff and we don't need a playoff, first of all, you're saying that because the SEC always finds a way to get in the national championship game. All right. Now I think the last 7 years the national championship has came from the SEC.
Yeah.
Okay. Last year it was pretty obvious it was coming from the SEC.
Right.
LSU and Alabama played.
Right.
But here's my point. What does it take for the SEC to win a championship every single year?
An undefeated team.
No. An undefeated team, very true, very true. But my point is, they'll always have a team in the championship game.
Right.
Alabama, if they put them in there with one loss against Oregon, Notre Dame, or Kansas State, Alabama could win. Not saying they necessarily for sure would, but they could win. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so if I find a way to put them in there, they could still win it, make it 8 years in a row. We don't know. Notre Dame, Oregon, Kansas State might knock them off, but the point is, if the regular season is a playoff, Alabama lost, they have to be out. Okay? And even if someone else loses, get someone else in there. Let someone else have a chance. You know, you gave Alabama the second chance last year. Sure, they made a lot with it. Heck, you give a lot of teams a second chance, they're going to turn it into a national championship.
Absolutely.
That's just my point. That's my push with the BCS. I'm not a fan of the BCS. I'm so glad we're going to a playoff in a couple years. Just think about this year with the playoff. You know, yeah, Alabama's still involved, but we're looking at Alabama and K-State, and then if Alabama wins that playing Notre Dame or Oregon, then they are earning the national championship rather than having, you know, one of these things handing it to them.
Right, I agree totally, and I too am in favor of the playoffs. But I talked to a gentleman last week and asked him. He's a big college football fan. He's, you know, just met him through work. And anyway, I asked him about the college playoff system and if he was in favor of it. And he said he wasn't, and I was surprised to hear him say it. You know, he doesn't like the playoff system they have right now because it's just limited to 4 teams, and it's still going to favor those big name schools like Alabama, like Florida, like LSU, like USC.
Yep.
But the thing is this is just one step closer to maybe, you know, in a couple of years a couple of years after the 14, we go to an 18. You know,
then you're exactly right.
I think once we get to that 8-team playoff or even a 12-team playoff, then I think you're looking at more of earning a national championship instead of just a 14.
You're exactly right. But the thing is, if we have a 4, 8, 16, 32, look at college basketball. We had 64 and it worked great. Now we go to 68. You know, then we went to 65, then to 68. You're always leaving someone out. There's always an outsider looking in.
Yeah,
look at National Football League. Look at the NFL. You know, there's always a team. Look at the Vikings. The playoffs started today. The Vikings are 1 game out. Looking in. Say we expanded to 7, 8 teams. Yeah, sure the Vikings then sneak in. Then you got a team down a little bit lower. Maybe it's the Dallas Cowboys outside looking in. But there's always going to be that. Major League Baseball expanded their playoffs. You know, I think it was a good expansion. Got it to 5 teams now, 2 wild cards. There's still another team on the outside looking in. Why don't we go to 6 teams? You're always going to have that. So I think having 4 teams is just fine. But like you said, I think if we can eventually show that 4 teams makes college football better, it's the greatest sport we have with the worst system we have, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm a college football fan over any other sport. But when it comes to their playoff system, their postseason, I'd much rather watch NFL, college basketball, okay? Major League Baseball.
Yep.
That's my opinion on that. But we're going to move on now, I believe, to some NBA and talk some Lakers. That's always interesting.
Oh, it is always interesting. And if you guys haven't heard yet today, I'm sure, you know, if you're watching our show, I'm sure you've heard it on ESPN or ESPN Radio. Lakers fired Mike Brown last week was it Friday? I think they fired him.
Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon they fired Mike Brown. A lot of speculation on who they were going to bring in to replace him. You know, Mike D'Antoni's name was thrown out there. Jerry Sloan, bringing the Zen Master back out of retirement. And the minute I heard Phil Jackson's name thrown out there, I thought, bam, he's back. He's going to be coaching the Lakers, and it's going to be the Kobe and the Phil Jackson show again. Back to that always great triangle offense that I grew up watching with the Chicago Bulls. I love that offense. But woke up this morning, turned on ESPN Radio, listening to Mike and Mike in the morning, and who do you hear his name called out as LA Lakers coach? None other than Mike D'Antoni. Big surprise to me. Doesn't make sense to me. We'll get to that as soon as Logan gives his input on it. But, you know, what do you think Mike D'Antoni is as Lakers' new coach?
What I said about Mike D'Antoni, a matter of fact, the thing is, we talked about this show. We talked about talking about the Lakers coaching change Friday, and we talked about the guys they possibly bring in. And Mike D'Antoni was one of the options. Along with, like we said, we mentioned Jerry Sloan, we mentioned Nate McMillan.
Yep.
We also mentioned Phil Jackson.
Yep.
Well, the way it sounded, Saturday, Sunday, all the news headlines, simply you turn it to ESPN, there's a new headline every day. The way it sounded is that Phil Jackson was coming back. So I get all my notes all ready, all prepared, all ready to how to say what I want to say about Phil Jackson coming back, and I wake up this morning and it's Mike D'Antoni. I don't know if I like the move. You know, Stephen A. Smith was on Sports Center this morning. Not sure how many people saw this, but he started off, and you know, Stephen A. Smith, I really want to question him sometimes, because he will always find a way to talk someone up and then talk them right back down, and I don't understand it. He made some comment about Mike D'Antoni, a good NBA coach. I just don't know. I think he could be a good assistant coach. I think he could be a good offensive coach, offensive coordinator, if you will, of an NBA team.
Right.
You know, his sons led the league in scoring some for years, but he was also in the low 20s and even dead last in defense. And in New York in 3 years, he was 28, 3 years in a row in defense. Okay? The Lakers, how are they going to win a championship? With the group of guys they have, if they have to push the ball and score 115 points a game. They're not going to. These guys are not young. Kobe Bryant, he's 34. Steve Nash, 37.
Yeah.
Okay? Dwight Howard, sorry, he's not a rookie.
No.
Granted, he's 24, 25, but he's not an 18-year-old guy fresh into the league. Okay? Ron Artest, we know his age. Paul Gasol, he's 32. These guys are old. They can't push the ball to the floor. We talked about last week. You know, Jordan Hill, Steve Blake, Devin Eubanks. These are these guys' replacements. Okay? So, I like the idea of bringing Phil Jackson back. And then the other thing I want to point out is that no one touched on it. Not even Stephen A. Not even Skip Bayless. Nobody touched on this. And I want to point out that the fact that, you know what, the Los Angeles Lakers, they got some, you talked about prima donnas, they got some big egos on that team. With Dwight Howard, with Meta World Peace.
Yeah.
Still trying to get used to saying that name.
Yeah.
But they got some big egos on this team. How is Mike D'Antoni going to deal with that? Didn't do so well with Amari Stoudemire in Phoenix. Didn't do so well with Amari Stoudemire and Carmelo Anthony in New York. Essentially got him fired. You don't think that if Carmelo Anthony can go tell a administration that he wants a coach gone, you don't think Kobe Bryant has that pull? I'm not saying that Mike D'Antoni's going to coach, and if they don't do well, he's going to be fired. But I don't think he'll be back next year if they don't do well. If they don't do well, by do well, I mean compete for a championship. That means make it at least to a conference semifinals or at least an NBA finals. Okay? They can't lose in the first or second round of the playoffs like they have been. It can't happen. Or they're going to go in a different direction. Then they have to.
Well, yeah, you made a lot of good points, and I'm going to disagree with you on the fact that I think Mike D'Antoni was a better hire than Phil Jackson. You know, Phil Jackson had his stint with the Lakers, and word has it is that, you know, even though he's dating Jerry Buss's daughter and has been for a long time now, there really wasn't a good relationship between Phil Jackson and the Lakers. Phil Jackson always wanted more power than what they were willing to give him. You know, Phil Jackson's going to want more money. Phil Jackson's getting old. He's 67 years old. He's got some health problems. You know, how invested is he going to be in the coaching? Yeah, yes, granted, Mike D'Antoni is known more for his offense than he is his defense. But a lot of that had to go around the roster you had. You know, you had Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire. You had more of an offensive-minded roster than a defensive-minded roster. If you have defensive guys like, say, the Chicago Bulls do, or whoever, Milwaukee Bucks who are playing good right now, or Memphis Grizzlies who are playing, that's more of a defensive-minded roster. You know, then you're going to be more focused on your defense than you are on your offense. You know, same in New York, as in Phoenix. Mike D'Antoni had more offensive guys than he did defensive guys, so he's going to focus more on offense. I don't think, now, let me finish. I think that the Lakers are in that group too, where they have more offensive guys. They are not going to be able to focus their whole time on defense to win a championship. They are going to have to score to win games. The thing is Mike D'Antoni, you said, can he handle the LA pressure? I think he can. As Colin Cowherd touched on, he's a good-looking guy. He fits the LA lifestyle. He can handle the press. He's calm with the press. He doesn't get overexcited with the press, nailing him with questions. He knows how to handle that. I think he can handle. I don't think you can compare prima donnas such as Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire to Kobe Bryant and Dwight Howard. I think Carmelo Anthony is way more of a prima donna than Kobe Bryant ever will be.
Then Dwight Howard? Dwight Howard, this is the biggest crybaby in the league.
All Dwight Howard wanted to do was be on a team that was put together to win. It was just like LeBron James in Cleveland, Dwight Howard in Orlando. They were not going to bring in the pieces to put around Dwight Howard to win, just as they were not going to bring in the pieces to put around LeBron James to win in Cleveland. We touched on it last time with LeBron James. Neither one of us had a problem with LeBron James going to Miami to play with better superstars to win.
But LeBron never, ever, ever, ever threw the towel in. He never called the coach out. He never called the owner out. He never called his teammates out. Dwight Howard is a selfish individual, and if you don't think he is, you're crazy.
Well,
you're crazy.
I'm not saying he's not, but I'm saying he's not as much as Carmelo Anthony. He's not as much as Amari Stoudemire. You know, these guys.
We never saw this though. We never saw this. We never saw this during the.
We saw it last year
during the playoffs. You never would have saw Amari Stoudemire and Carmelo Anthony call out their coach to be fired in the middle of a postseason series. That's what Dwight Howard did with Stan Van Gundy when the Magic were in the playoffs. You can't do that.
No, I agree you can't. But it was, he had his way of getting out of Orlando, just as Shaq had his way of getting out of Orlando.
All right. So let me ask you this question, and you answer it however you want. I won't argue on it. If the Lakers lose a playoff series, do the Lakers, when Dwight Howard's being interviewed, is he going to take blame on himself, or is he going to place the blame on the coach?
I think now, with his role with the Lakers, I think he takes blame on himself.
I just do not think that will ever happen.
I think coming into LA, having a mentor such as Kobe Bryant, he didn't have that in Orlando.
It's been 6 games though.
He was the guy to go to in Orlando, and he can't handle that. I agree. He cannot handle being the guy to go to. But when you have a guy like Kobe Bryant on your team, and you see the way Kobe Bryant acts, you see the maturity he has, you see the respect he has for his coach, for his fans, for his team, that's going to wear off on you. Same with Steve Nash. Steve Nash has been an upstanding NBA player his whole career. Yep. I think that's just going to rub off on Dwight Howard, and he's going to mature a little bit. Look at Andrew Bynum. We always said Andrew Bynum was immature, but yet, being under Kobe's wing, he didn't act that way.
Well, I think Andrew Bynum had his issues, but I think here's the thing that we have to agree on. It's only been 6 games.
Right.
I can't guarantee, but I can predict that Dwight will not change. You cannot guarantee, but you can predict that he will. But as of right now, he has not. It's been 6 games. We're at the same place. We're at the same place we started. When the season's all said and done, you may be right, I may be right. It's something that we can't tell until it happens. I think getting Phil Jackson, this guy's got 11 championships. They are built to win, and built to win within like a 3-year window.
Right.
When Kobe's not there, they're not going to win.
Right.
Who knows if Dwight even comes back to them?
Right.
We don't know these things. Okay?
Right.
So, my point is, I felt like they were built to win. I felt they were built to win. And a 3 year, that's pushing it along to the long end.
Right.
I think this year, next year, maybe a year after that.
Well, if you go a year after that, you're at the very end of Kobe's career.
Yeah, you have to be. So, but let's. We talked a little bit about New York. Let's dive into them a little bit. I want to know what you think about New York. They're off to a pretty hot start. What do you think about these guys?
They are off to a pretty hot start. They're playing good basketball. Are they for real? I just don't think so. I don't think you can count the New York Knicks as a true contender in the East. I think they're just off to a good start because their players are happy to be back playing basketball. They're happy to be back on the floor. I think they fizzle out right around All-Star break, and then they start having their troubles in the second half of the season. I'm going to warn you fans out there, you NBA fans, you Knicks fans, don't be fooled by this hot start that they've had. They're gonna crumble like they have in the past. Carmelo Anthony, as I stated before, he's a good basketball player, but I just think he's all about Carmelo. I don't think he's all about winning. And Amari Stoudemire, he's all about Amari Stoudemire. You can't have those two guys on the same. They don't work together. They're two guys that gotta have the ball in order to be good. They gotta have the ball in their hands in order to be productive. And there's just not enough basketballs to go around for both.
We knew their offense could be explosive. And they're third in the league, averaging 104 points a game. I know it's been 6 games, 7 games, whatever. But the defense is what I like to see. These guys are playing defense. And you know what? Here's my point. Here's my point, Leo, with Mike D'Antoni. This is the same team, virtually, that Mike D'Antoni had. Essentially. Jeremy Lin made his insanity thing after the D'Antoni era, and now they don't have him again. They do have Jason Kidd. That's about the only change.
Yeah.
Okay? First in the league. Okay? Not in the conference, in the league in defense. 84 points a game. They've played Miami. They've played, and that's huge to them. And the reason I say that is because Miami is, like we talked about a little bit later in the show, they're killing teams. You know, they're smoking teams, and New York shut them. You know, they have the best defense in the league, and they played Miami. So that's what I like to point out, is that it's not just the offense. It's not just scoring a bunch of points a game. It's winning against Miami. You know, they beat Philadelphia, a playoff team, twice. Dallas, when Dallas was really hot. They're 4-0. They got a game tomorrow night against Orlando. Should be able to win. They go into that San Antonio game 5-0. That's a big game. San Antonio's going to be sitting 6-7-1.
Yeah. San Antonio's got a big game against the Lakers tomorrow night.
Yep. But I think Jason Kidd's huge for leadership. He'll mentor Raymond Felton, who I feel is a potential star. But here's what I talk about: Stoudemire's return. You know, this guy's talented, but can he gel with Carmelo? I think Stoudemire helps the Knicks no matter what, because if he doesn't gel, they have to find a way to get rid of him and get someone else in return. They got shooters, okay? J.R. Smith, Ronnie Brewer, Steve Novak. They need depth behind Tyson Chandler in the post because we know he's had injury problems, and we also know that Carmelo and Amari Stoudemire have injury problems. So they might need to get some more depth, and trading Amari might be a good thing because it gets them depth and eliminates that little friction between Carmelo and Amari Stoudemire that we know is there. And I think that they can be for real to compete, but in the end I see them being maybe a 3rd or 4th seed at best. Yeah. And they're probably more like a 6 or a 7.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is a good point you made on their defense, but I just want to say one thing. Memphis is 5-1, and they're winning games too, and they're looking good too. I mean, are you saying that Memphis is as good as New York?
We're looking at Memphis being as good as New York. No. The reason I say, don't discount it. Memphis is a 5 seed last year in the postseason.
Right.
Might actually been a 4 with the Clippers. I believe Memphis was the 4.
Right.
So Memphis is a good team, but my point is about New York is that they have the stars. You know, they have the Jason Kidds, the Carmelo Anthony's of the world, Amari Stoudemire. They have the big players to go along with the role players. It's not just a team of role players, and that's what I feel like Memphis sort of is.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're gonna agree to disagree on the New York Knicks. I've never been a New York Knicks fan, and whether it's good for basketball or not, it is good for basketball if the Knicks are winning. So we'll see how that pans out with their quick start.
Absolutely.
Well, we're gonna finish up with some college basketball. Just touch on one quick thing. Let's go over our Final Four predictions and our championship prediction.
Okay.
I know it's still early in the season, but it's always kind of fun to do this early in the season and see how you end up at the end of the year.
Absolutely, because the thing about doing this, you can be completely wrong, and you don't look like a bonehead because it's so early in the season. But you can make a pick, and if it turns out to be the right one, you look like an absolute genius.
Right, absolutely. So let's give me your Final Four first off.
Well, first off, in my Final Four, I've got some teams that like we said, I want to first of all stop and say, it's hard to figure out who's going to be in the Final Four. But when push comes to shove, you know what? I see a lot of these guys on my picks, and I think that they're going to be there because you see a guy in Indiana, Cody Zeller. Okay, I think he's going to improve on his 15.6 and 6.6 points and rebounds respectively. This guy shot 62% last year from the field, but he only took 9 shots a game. So I think they're going to get him the ball a little bit more, get him up in the 14 to 15 shot range a game per game, and essentially pick up an extra 10 points possibly, 8 points, something in that vicinity. So Indiana's one pick. Kentucky, I think Calipari, once again, he's got a stacked roster. Not sure if they have enough chemistry to win it all or even make the Final Four. They might get bounced in the second round of the Sweet 16. But I know they're talented enough that if they can gel, they can make a run to the Final Four. Louisville, Peyton Siva coming back. Rick Pitino got so close to a national championship last year. Ended up losing to Kentucky. Gave him a good run. You know, I really would like to see Rick Pitino get back to the Final Four. That's where he belongs. He's a great coach. Look what he did with this Louisville program. Brought him from nothing into something. And then my last one, I got Kansas. I like Kansas here because I think Bill Self, he continues to put teams together. This might be one of the best college basketball coaches ever in the end because of the way that he builds a program and establishes it wherever he goes. Okay? We talk about Kansas. Jeff Withey, Elijah Johnson, Travis Relaford. These are guys that, yeah, the average college basketball fan has no idea who they were talking about. Okay, we have absolutely no clue. But here's the thing: these guys continue to do it. These guys continue to get the job done for Bill Self. I don't know if he's that good of a coach, but I think he has a system. Or sorry, I take that back. That good of a recruiter, but he has a system that brings guys in, and they somehow figured out how to play in his system and win. And we saw the guy do that at Oral Roberts, at Tulsa, at Illinois, and at Kansas. Matter of fact, we actually saw him go up against Kansas at Illinois and win. And that's just something that you have to look at and say that this guy is a good coach. And that's where I feel like why I picked Kansas. And I picked Kansas over Louisville in the national championship just because of the coaching. Especially this early in the season, we don't know. Someone could have a breakout superstar player that is completely under the radar. Could be from North Carolina, could be from Duke, could be from NC State, could be from anywhere. Someone has a breakout player that we don't know about, and then this changes everything. But right now, I think it comes on the coaching. Not saying Self's the best coach or recruiter in the league, or sorry, in the association in the country. But I think Bill Self has the greatest system because he's there, relevant in the tournament, high seed every single year.
Right. Yep. I agree with everything you said on Bill Self. I just, he's got a long way to go before he makes a name for himself, like a Krzyzewski or like a Roy Williams or like a Bobby Knight or that. But he's definitely got the potential to do it. He's got the dedication to what he does as a coach. He's in a great school with Kansas, great basketball school. And like you said, he brings guys in like Roy Williams does, like Coach Krzyzewski does, to fit their system. He doesn't go out and recruit the one and done, the superstar players. He brings in the guys that are top, recruits, but they fit his system.
Yep.
Just quickly over my Final Four, we look at last year, we had Kentucky and Kansas and Ohio State and Louisville. Kentucky ended up being your national championship. I think, as you said, only 2 of those teams are back into the Final Four next year. Kansas, I think that Kansas has a little bit harder of a road to get there just because of some of the talent they lost last year. But like you said, Bill Self's got the talent, or got the system to do it. He's got the system in place to definitely do it. But Louisville, I think him and Evan Pitino will be back in it. But Kansas and Louisville, they're going to be in the Final Four. Indiana, I definitely think they have a chance to be in the Final Four. And I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say North Carolina State gets in that Final Four too. So I'm going to say it's Indiana, Louisville, Kansas, and North Carolina State. And I'm going to say it's going to be Indiana, depending on how the brackets work out. But I'm going to say Indiana and Kansas in that national championship, and I'm going to go opposite of you, and I'm going to say Indiana wins the national championship.
And that's a safe bet, But the thing that scared me about that is the preseason number 1 seems like there's always kind of a cast of a little doubt hanging over the guy's head.
Right.
We talk about these great coaches and whatever, and do you measure a coach by Final Fours, or do you measure a coach by national championships? And that's one thing you really gotta, because that ultimately does make a huge difference, because if you talk about Final Fours by coaches, and talk about national championship by coaches, it's completely different. John Calipari has taken his team to 4 Final Fours and only won 1 national championship. Okay, that's a huge difference than someone like Bill Self, who's been the 2 and won 1. You know, that's 50% of 25%. I know we're comparing small numbers there.
Right.
If you look at John
Right.
Wooden making it to 12, I believe they won 11.
Yeah.
I mean, that's spectacular. That he will never be touched for that. You know, Mike Krzyzewski, I think he's went to 11 Final Fours and he's won 3 or 4. That just is a little. That's not quite like 11 out of 12 is not as good. Or excuse me, 4 out of 11 is not 11 out of 12.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Well, here, you know, you want to talk about measuring great coaches. Here's how I measure a great coach. He's a guy who brings players in. You're coaching at a college level. We're talking about college level coaches. I'm looking at a coach who brings guys in for 4 years, graduates players, makes respectable citizens out of these players. I don't care about what you're sending to the NBA. I don't care how many. I mean, yeah, I care about how many Final Fours you're making. I care about how many national championships you're winning.
Right.
But in the end, is what have you done for college basketball? What have you done for your university? You know, you look at Mike Krzyzewski. He is by far probably the most identified figure in college basketball, just for what he's done for Duke, what he's
exactly
done for
right.
college basketball. You know, you look at guys like Bill Self, like John Wooden. Their main goal was to not only grow basketball players, but grow citizens when they're done.
Right.
One quote I heard from John Wooden, you know, and I use this in my coaching philosophy for the 4 years I coached, is you do your coaching at practice. You don't do your yelling at the game. You don't do your screaming at the kids at the game during your timeouts. Your timeouts are to make adjustments, fix things that are going wrong on the court, not to chew your kids out. You do your coaching at practice. And that's definitely shown in what John Wooden has done in his history. And I think Mike Krzyzewski has that same model. You know, you don't see Mike Krzyzewski hooping and hollering on the sideline very much. He does occasionally, but he's a pretty calm demeanor guy. He knows what he has to do during those timeouts and during the game.
Here's my point on that. Touch a little bit more on that before we wrap it up. You know what? The reason I feel that the winning the championship is more than the Final Four is because what do you need to win a championship? Okay? Yeah, you need good players. You need good X's and O's. You need good philosophy of coaching. You need character. You need chemistry. You need gelling together. And like you said, that takes more than just a year in
Right.
most circumstances
Right.
for these guys to get that good to win. We saw Kentucky win it. That's one time. You know what? If they win 5 more in Calipari's career, that's very fine. Then he has a case. But right now, Calipari is 1 out of 4.
Right.
Okay? Because he doesn't. You know, he talks about his grade point average all the time. We discussed all that. Okay? These guys are in school for a year. They're taking, like you said, freshman level classes.
Right. Right.
Classes that to get an A, you basically just have to show up.
Right.
You know, they're taking intro to music.
Yeah.
Okay, you know that's his team GPA, and not all of them are, because he does have some upperclassmen, but the majority are freshmen. That helps the GPA. So to have a 3.1 team GPA, I believe is what he said. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's what he said. I don't know if that's that great of a deal.
Right.
Okay, but now here's what I want to say. Talk about the guys who kept guys around, who preach character, who teach to be high individuals, whose players, even if they are NBA ready, Thomas Robinson. NBA ready the year before he left, stayed. Morris Twins, NBA ready the year before they left, stay of the year.
Yep.
Okay? These guys come back just because they are respected by this coach and they know that he's going to make them a better individual too. And that results in winning championships.
Right.
Okay? Bill Self, he's 1 of 2. Okay? Coach K, all right? He's 4 of 11. All right? Now I look at that, and that's a little different, but he's about the only one. We saw John Wooden. He's 10 of 12. Okay, go all the way back to the years of Adolph Rupp, 4 of 6. We know this guy. I mean, this is back when it wasn't an option to leave early. He played college
Right.
basketball for 4
Right.
years.
Right.
But you know, we see all these guys, and then we look at guys. You know, like I said, Billy Donovan, he's 2 of 3. When we look at guys like Coach Calipari, that's 1 of 4. And I can see Kentucky going to the Final Four every single year. But I can see them losing 2 or 3 times before they win one.
Right.
And does that make him a great coach? I don't know. He's got a lot of talent.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think one other guy we didn't really touch on, former Kansas coach Roy Williams, he's like 2 of 5, I think, or something like that.
2 of 7.
2 of 7. So I mean, even there, you know, he was kind of in that
But
little
I-
bit where he, you know, he's now that he's with North Carolina, he's starting to recruit like that, where I'm going to recruit guys within my system and they're going to stay for 4 years.
But what I want to know about the coaching is, in my opinion, a great coach in college basketball is one that wins national championships and, like you said, creates better citizens.
Right.
Now, I don't think you measure it on Final Fours, because if you make 11 Final Fours and win 2 titles, or like Coach K, win 4 titles and make 11 or 12 Final Fours. Billy Donovan's won 2 and made 3.
Right.
You know, Billy Donovan coaches for 15 more years. He might win 4 championships, the same as Coach K, and he might only made 6 or 8 Final Fours.
Right.
Okay. So does that make him a better coach than Coach K? You don't know.
Right.
I mean, what do you measure by? Do you measure by games? I don't think it's fair to measure by games, because some conferences and scheduling is easier than others. You know, is it fair for anyone to say that Don Meyer was the greatest coach in college basketball history? I don't think so. Okay, he's coaching at Northern State University. He's not coaching at Duke, or at Indiana like Bob Knight, coaching against top of the line athletes that go to the NBA.
Right.
He's coaching in Aberdeen, South Dakota.
Right.
Take nothing away from Don Meyer. Okay, great basketball mind. Probably could have went and coached at a big school. Okay, but it's not the same, and that's why it's just not fair to compare Coach K to Billy Donovan. They play in different conferences. They play in different basketball venues.
Right.
I think that's why, ultimately, to compare coaches, you have to compare by national championships, not Final Fours, national championships. And that's why I think John Wooden, to me, is the best basketball coach in college basketball in the history, and he's won 10 championships. And to me, that's why.
Yeah. No, I'll agree with you on that. And like you said, you touched on Don Meyer, 923 wins in his college coaching career. He's got the most out of anybody in any college level. Mike Krzyzewski's got the most in Division I, right? He passed Bob Knight.
I believe Mike Krzyzewski has passed Bob Knight, yes.
Yeah. So he's still got a few more wins to go to catch Don Meyer. You know, and that's one thing I want to touch on is, you know, they talk about most wins. They forget to mention that it's Division I wins for Mike Krzyzewski. I mean, yeah, Don Meyer coached at a Division II level in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and at Hamline University and Lipscomb University, but to be in it for as long as he was in order to win 923 games, that's pretty impressive. You look at Pat Summitt, Tennessee University girls coach. Yep. She has over 1,000 wins in her coaching career. That's even more impressive to me. Yeah, it's women's basketball, but you have 1,000 wins as a coach, over 1,000 wins as a coach. I mean, that's just impressive, and it's sad to see her go out the way she did with her ailment. But
talk about how many wins does Don Meyer have? 923.
923.
Okay, Coach K is 927, so he did in effect pass
Don
Meyer. Yep, he's 927. He won 73 games at Army, and he won 852 games at Duke in the last 22 years. What I'd be interested to know, maybe you can tell me this: how many years did Don Meyer coach? How many head coaching years did this guy have? So I believe he coached at Lipscomb. Was it Lipscomb?
Yep. Lipscomb and Hamline University.
And Northern.
Yep.
And how many years altogether? Can you give me a rough estimate? Because if you look at Coach K, we're talking about 22 years. Sorry, 32 years at Duke already, plus 5 years at Army. He's coached 37 years.
He had from 72 to 75, so that's 3 years at Hamline. He had 75 to 85 at Lipscomb, so that's 10 years. And then another, let's see, 85 to 96, so there's 21 years and 24 years. And then he was at Northern State for 10 years, so roughly 35 years of coaching.
35 years, and he won 923 games?
Yeah.
Well, just a little rough estimate. I mean, he's won 26.3 games a year, and Coach K's won about 25. So, you know that's it's close. It's close.
Right.
But
like you said, Coach K's Division I.
It's different venues. It's different venues.
And
but you know what? I have to be careful how I say that. And we're just about ready to be signing off here. But one last thing, and you can respond if you like. I'd be careful how I say that, because granted, Coach K is coaching against, and this is on Don Meyer's side, Coach K is coaching against tougher players, but he has the tougher players as well.
Right.
So, he can recruit those big name guys as well to play against the other big name guys. So it kind of balances out. So I like to compare it, but I think they're pretty even now. Obviously, Coach K is going to keep going. By the end of the year, he'll be probably 40, maybe 30 wins ahead of Don Meyer, instead of only 4. So.
Right. Well, we've had a lot of good discussion today on a lot of different topics: NFL, college football. Excited to see how the college football plays out. Excited to see how next week in the NFL, what we come back with our power rankings in a week-to-week league.
Be sure to get on Twitter and give us a follow, DBLD Sports Show.
We'd love to hear from you. Like we said last time, we encourage argument. We'd love to hear from you. You know, make a comment on our video. We had a pretty good number of viewing last week, or from last week to this week. You know, we're getting better, folks. That's one thing we talked about last week. We always want to get better, so we're going to continue to work and make our show a little bit better and entertain you guys as much as possible. So we thank you again, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week.
This has been Double D Sports Show.